Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. It's great to be back with you. My name is Mac Worley III. This is On the Move. This is a show that attempts to inspire you to stand up for your rights. Today, we got a lot on the agenda. We have a whole heap of things that we're going to be getting to. First and foremost, our feature topics for this week are why we cannot win a second Cold War with Russia the same way we did before, and why increased global tension could lead to an economic collapse. I want to talk about the relationship between Turkey and ISIS. I want to mention the Sunni Shia split. We'll break that down. I want to talk about how the U.S. government not only created ISIS, but they are using them to their advantage. I want to talk about ISIS's, and in particularly the Muslim Brotherhood's, plan to spread the Caliphate worldwide. I want to talk about Russia's interests versus the Obama administration's interest. Let's make some comparisons, and let's try to contrast and see what the differences are. The argument, I want to talk about this, the argument against global government. I can't believe I have to have this argument. I can't believe that we actually have to discuss this, but I think that things are coalescing around this to where this is going to be an argument that you need to know. You'll need to know why global government is a bad thing. And I also want to relate it to why self-interest is a good thing. I want to talk about power vacuums in the form of government or ungoverned zones. I want to talk about the balance of power and the current statist power grab that is going on right now. In addition to all of this, I want to talk about the domestic unrest that is on the rise in our country and how I believe it is going to get massively worse. This is your warning. This is the alarm bells going off. This is the information that you need to know about what's coming. Today's episode is episode 97 of our program. It's titled Economic Collapse, World War III, Unrest, Terrorism. These are all the problems that we're facing right now. This is what is coming. Now, some of these things, if cooler heads prevail, some of these things may not happen. You know, I really do hope that I'm wrong. I hope that I'm projecting things that will never happen. I'm hoping that this isn't going to happen, but I see in terms of the economic collapse, the writing's on the wall. This thing's over. You know, it's bound to collapse, and we'll get to why. World War III, I think, will happen. I think we're at the precipice of it right now. I believe that we are at the beginning stages of World War III, and we'll get to that. I want to talk about the political unrest, the civil unrest, the domestic problems that we're going to be facing here at home. What is happening right now with the Black Lives Matter movement? How is this going to get worse, especially when you combine the effects of economic collapse and global war? In addition to that, the threat of terrorism remains a daily threat, and it's not going away. In fact, it's only becoming a more realer possibility of something that could happen in our near future. Another terrorist attack, another 9/11, another Paris-style attack here in America only seems a matter of time with our current policies. So, we have a lot to get to. Anyway, we got a whole lot more that we're going to be talking about. If you would like to join today's conversation, please feel free to give us a call. The number to the show is 360-450-5625. Again, 360-450-5625. You can message us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow or on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. And don't forget to check us out at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. You can follow us on our Spreaker website, Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. That's like the main place for the podcast that you can go, but it's also on our homepage on OnTheMoveShow.com, so you can go there. That's our hub for everything. In addition, you can like us on Facebook, Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow, Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And yeah. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to start the first topic here of the day. I want to talk specifically about Cold War tensions between Russia and America starting to build now and why. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
A chance.
Governor Romney, I'm glad that you recognize that Al-Qaeda is a threat, because a few months ago, when you were asked what's the biggest geopolitical threat facing America, you said Russia. Not Al-Qaeda, you said Russia. In the 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back, because the Cold War's been over for 20 years. But, Governor, when it comes to our foreign policy, you seem to want to import the foreign policies of the 1980s, just like the social policies of the 1950s and the economic policies of the 1920s. You say that you're not interested in duplicating what happened in Iraq, but just a few weeks ago you said you think we should have more troops in Iraq right now. And the challenge we have, I know you haven't been in a position to actually execute foreign policy, but every time you've offered an opinion, you've been wrong. You said we should have gone into Iraq, despite the fact that there were no weapons of mass destruction. You said that we should still have troops in Iraq to this day. You indicated that we shouldn't be passing nuclear treaties with Russia, despite the fact that 71 senators, Democrats and Republicans, voted for it. You've said that, first, we should not have a timeline in Afghanistan. Then you said we should. Now you say maybe, or it depends, which means not only were you wrong, but you were also confusing and sending mixed messages both to our troops and our allies. So what we need to do with respect to the Middle East is strong, steady leadership, not wrong and reckless leadership that is all over the map. And unfortunately, that's the kind of opinions that you've offered throughout this campaign, and it is not a recipe for American strength or keeping America safe over the long
I'm
run.
going to add a couple of minutes here to give you a chance to respond.
Well, of course, I don't concur with what the president said about my own record and the things that I've said. They don't happen to be accurate. But I can say this, that we're talking about the Middle East and how to help the Middle East reject the kind of terrorism we're seeing and the rising tide of tumult and confusion. And attacking me is not an agenda. Attacking me is not talking about how we're going to deal with the challenges that exist in the Middle East and take advantage of the opportunity there and stem the tide of this violence. But I'll respond to a couple of things you mentioned. First of all, Russia, I indicated, is a geopolitical foe. Not a,
Number one,
excuse me, it's a geopolitical foe. And I said in the same paragraph, I said, and Iran is the greatest national security threat we face. Russia does continue to battle us in the UN time and time again. I have clear eyes on this. I'm not going to wear rose-colored glasses when it comes to Russia or Mr. Putin. And I'm certainly not going to say to him, I'll give you more flexibility after the election.
So, that was Mitt Romney, by the way. And he was talking, this is October 2012, he was talking about how Russia is our biggest geopolitical foe. Now, one thing you have to understand is that geopolitical, it doesn't necessarily mean that there are that they're conducting some kind of attack on us or planning to attack us in any way. Geopolitics is basically the study of how geography affects politics or national interest of a country. So Russia is one of the epitomes of that definition. What they do is they try to contain and control resources. That's why things like the European oil pipeline that's in Russian hands are a big threat geopolitically because they can just turn off the oil supply. They can threaten to cut it off. That's why Russia's involvement in the Middle East is concerning with the American interests, because if Russia is involved in that as well as having the European pipeline, then we could potentially see an issue where Russia is able to really affect the world's oil supply. Now, none of this would be an issue for America if we only had our own oil that we were pumping. But, the environmentalists, they just won't let us do that. We have all the oil that we need for at least 100 years. I've seen estimates that range from 100 to hundreds of years of oil, natural resources underneath our feet that could get us off of foreign oil until we develop some kind of alternative. If we were to unleash the market, if we were actually to unregulate the market to where innovators could actually find a way around oil, then none of this would even matter. And in fact, nobody would really care about the Middle East if there was no oil. These regimes would not be propped up. And it's important to note that it would potentially cause these regimes over there to come tumbling down anyway. And there would be a power vacuum that would be created, and who knows, it might be filled by jihadi terrorists over there anyway. So perhaps we would still be facing jihadi terrorists. Perhaps we wouldn't. That's hard to say. Either way, it's something that should be on our radar. But Romney was right about Russia. I mean, in particular, being a geopolitical foe. Look at what they're doing in Syria. They're trying to secure their interests, which is not necessarily a bad thing for us if we weren't trying to secure that interest for ourselves through nation building and trying to topple the Assad regime. We are involved right now in Syria. The whole situation, in fact, the entire Middle East is destabilized because of our involvement. We decided that we were just going to start going after dictators over there. We go after in Egypt. We support the uprising over there. Oh, suddenly, Egyptian dictator out of power. We decide to move on to Libya. Gaddafi. Oh, okay. Sorry, Gaddafi. You're out of there now. And Libya is destabilized. And we're doing the same thing with Assad, except we're actually funding the terror groups. We are giving arms, supplies, money to these Syrian rebels, U.S.-backed Syrian rebels, who are, in fact, the same people that we are fighting in Afghanistan. So we're literally arming and supplying our enemies to conduct warfare in Syria against Assad. And there's a schism between these terrorist groups, and the rebels are, in fact, terrorists. And the ISIS groups, those are terrorists as well. They just don't get along with each other. They're fighting for power. They're fighting over power right now. So, we're going to get to all that here in a little while, but before we do, let's focus on the Cold War issue with Russia. All right? Right now, tensions are escalating. If you weren't aware, Turkey, a NATO member country, they shot down a Russian jet, Su-24, Russian jet, if I'm remembering correctly. So they shot this jet down, and in the process, these Syrian rebels with our arms and equipment, I believe, killed, while he was parachuting, one of the pilots. And then, first of all, that's against the Geneva Convention, but terrorists don't care about Geneva Convention, so okay. But that added insult to injury to Russia. Not only did their plane get shot down, and there's some debate about whether or not the Russian plane was in Turkish airspace or not, because it crashed inside Syria. So if it was in Turkish airspace, why did it crash in Syria? Okay, I'm willing to give Turkey the benefit of the doubt and assume that Russia was actually probing them, which is something Russia does. Russia will do that kind of thing. So, but the answer to that is not to display weakness and insecurity by shooting down the Russian plane. Now, especially if you look at the geographical location, this plane was cutting across the border. It was basically, cutting across a very narrow section, as far as borders are concerned, of Turkish airspace. So, it was only in Turkish airspace reportedly for a short period of time, and it was on its way out. So it was kind of like a peninsula kind of situation where the border was, although it's not a peninsula. But imagine there's no other land around and we're in water when you're outside of Turkey. Okay, so the border kind of went around in an arc or so, a peninsula style shape, and the Russian plane cut across this peninsula. It wasn't very long that they were in this airspace and they were going out. Apparently, they got shot down while they're in the process, and that's why they maybe landed in Syria. So, or maybe they were never in Turkish airspace to begin with. I don't know. The facts of that are basically, whose word are you going to believe? Are you going to believe Putin's word, or are you going to believe Turkey's word? I don't know. I don't know who to believe in this scenario. But what I do know is that it's pretty foolish to just go ahead and shoot down a Russian plane that is not, it's not like it's heading to a city. It's not a direct threat to you. You can tell that they're just probing you, which is, again, that's what Russia does. They probe. They've been doing that with us. They want to see how many planes respond. They want to see what your reaction is. And this kind of response, for Putin anyway, is arguably a beneficial response. Yeah, he lost a pilot, but the fact that Turkey was the one to actually shoot someone down, it shows that Putin is potentially, in a global sense, a victim here, a victim of NATO. And then we have the issue here where we're talking about NATO in terms of, when an attack on one is an attack on all. I believe that's either Article 4 or Article 5 of the agreement in NATO. And that's very concerning, because if Russia does something against Turkey, this could lead us into a global war. And this is let's go back to foundational principles here, gang. Do you all remember the saying by our founders, beware of foreign entanglements? They didn't say that because they didn't want us to have any friends. They didn't say that because they didn't want us to have any allies. They said that because they wanted us to be careful of who we align ourselves with strategic alliances that say we will defend these people when these people may not have our best interest at heart, or they may do things that may instigate us to get into a heated conflict, a very heavy conflict. And this is a perfect example. For example, Turkey. I don't believe that Turkey likes us very much. Now, there are people, maybe there's people out there that disagree with me. I don't think that Turkey likes us very much. I think they like the American dollars that we give them in foreign aid, and I think they like the fact that we have their back in terms of the conflict between them and Russia. I think they enjoy that, but I don't think they particularly like America. So why are we allied with people who don't particularly like us? And they're not really our friends, and we can't necessarily count on to have our back. I mean, what has Turkey done? I don't know. I'm not an expert on this stuff. I'm just some guy up here talking, but I've done a lot of research. Anyway, at this point, we're going to go ahead and bring on our intern. We got Mark Delphine on the line. Hey, Mark, are you there?
I sure am. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing well. So first and foremost, Mark, I just want to start here and ask you, have you heard about the news here? Have you been following this story with the Turkish airplane, or the Turkish military shooting down a Russian jet?
I saw the introduction of it. I saw it when it happened. I was paying attention to the news while it was happening, and then read the report the day after. Since then, it's all been a bit of a cloudy mess, considering how nobody really knows what's going on, but I have paid some attention to it, yeah.
Okay. And as far as your thoughts on this situation, what do you think is going on, and do you think that, for example, I believe that this is actually going to lead us into a World War III if we don't fall back into a more of a defensive position here, instead of what we're doing, where we're trying to play geopolitics out there and really control the resources. So what do you think?
Well, I think our hands are a little tied with NATO, unless we want to pull out of that treaty, and that would be big news. But to me, that's the best way of doing it. Just getting out of this mess, to me, is the absolute best solution. I know that there are a lot of dangers to doing so, but when you see the enemy of the enemy, which is your friend, which is also your enemy, which you don't really understand, and then you add a whole layer of religion on top of this, with a layer of a lack of civilization and understanding of any logic or reasoning when it comes to a lot of these countries, it's a real scary mess that I don't think we belong in at all. But then again, like I said, our hands are a little tied considering we're a part of NATO.
Well, we don't necessarily have to be part of NATO. That's the thing.
No,
we
can
right. Control
we shouldn't be.
Yeah, we can control our alliances. Now, this is something that I've suggested, and I will continue talking about it, because I believe that this is our way out. I don't believe this will happen, by the way. And I'm referring to the Fabian strategy, the plan that I've been talking about the last few episodes. But First, I don't believe that any strategy to get us out of this mess will actually be used. And the reason why I don't think it is happening is because I think that there is a statist power grab going on right now. And I hate the fact that I've been put into this situation where I'm getting conspiratorial now, but it seems like this isn't a conspiracy anymore. I think that it's clear. You either have people that are so stupid that are running the country into the ground. The Obama administration, they're doing things that are actively against American interest. They're either doing this accidentally or they're doing this on purpose. And I believe that they are fundamentally transforming America to make it useless. As George Soros says, and many of you may know who George Soros is. He's the billionaire, scary dude who is basically an amoral billionaire working to create a new world order. Now, I know this sounds very Alex Jones. I'm not... and nothing against Alex Jones. I'm not trying to get into this area, but the area, it just seems like it's rather obvious. And you see people who are talking about, like George Soros, saying that America is the biggest stumbling block for a new world order. They're talking about the globalization of government. They want a global government. Well, how would you do that? You have to take America down a notch. Obama's already expressed that he doesn't agree with America's power. If you look at George Soros' book, by the way, hold on, I have it right here. Okay, this is called The Bubble of American Supremacy, Correcting the Misuse of American Power. And this is written by George Soros, the billionaire, who's in league with the Obama administration and all their cronies and ilk like that. I honestly believe that they're trying to diminish American power to make us not a superpower anymore, to make us not the lead of American influence or just stability around the world. They want to take us down in order to create a global government, and they know that American government would never submit to that. The American people would never submit to that under the current circumstances. So how do you get America weakened? Well, you get us involved in a foreign war that is, against an ideology that you can never kill and you can never completely destroy it. I mean, if we look back at ancient history, for example, Nero, the ancient Roman emperor, he tried to kill Christians. Or maybe it was pagans. Now I can't remember. It was either pagans or Christians. He went on a killing spree against them, and it didn't work. You cannot kill it. You'll just drive it underground, and eventually it'll spring its head again. You have to actually either embrace things that can peacefully coexist, or you have to just spread information, or in governmental terms, propaganda, to explain why it's not a good idea or why it's a good idea or whatever. But anyway, we're dragging ourselves further and further into debt. $19 trillion of debt now. There's no way that we're going to be able to win the war on terrorism the way that we're doing it, especially because I don't believe that the Obama administration even wants to win. They are the ones who created ISIS. They're funding our enemies in Afghanistan and providing them with weapons. It's not a way you win the war. So they're not actually doing this to win. What they are doing is weakening us and strengthening our enemies. And this will all coalesce at once. And all of the enemies at the gates, all of the wolves that are surrounding us, just waiting for us to fall, will spring on us when they see the weakness. And we see that with Russia. Russia's been stepping up their aggression. So as far as Russia, let's talk about how we won the first Cold War. Mark, do you remember the Star Wars program back in the day of the 80s, I believe, when we were at the height of the Cold War?
I do, absolutely. Yes, I remember. I mean, clearly it was almost a pie-in-the-sky program that Reagan had the idea of, which was to put either satellites or some form of a defense in the air so that you would blow up your opponent's missiles if they were coming across, across the Atlantic or even across the Pacific. And really, again, it was a pie-in-the-sky thing where he just created this idea that we could go ahead and beat through their mutually assured destruction and be able to conquer whatever offense they had, so that they would have to focus and rely on defense, which essentially bankrupted them and caused the wall to fall.
Well, are you aware that Ronald Reagan actually knew at the time that a Star Wars program was not a viable option? It could never work, although he continued to talk about it.
That's what I mean. It's pie in the sky. I mean, there was no way of actually implementing it. It was just a way of scaring your enemies to the point where they were working on a defense as opposed to an offense. And when you have your opponents on a defense consistently, they're scrambling to do the things that you've already done, which thus, kills them militarily, it kills them morally, it kills them financially.
This is essentially, it's essentially one of the points in The Art of War, is that you want to control the tempo of the battle, of the war itself. So you want your opponent to react to what you've done as opposed to you reacting to what you are doing. And in this instance, Ronald Reagan, he knew that, there's no way that the Star Wars program would ever work. He kept having experts and people telling him, no, this will not work. And he was saying, shut up. Quit saying that. The whole idea was to get them, as you said, to spend, to get Russia to spend and spend and spend, and we knew that we could outspend them because our dollar was not linked to the gold standard. So we could just keep printing money, or Reagan knew that we weren't going to run out of money. We could run ourselves into $19 trillion of debt. Yeah, we'd be in a financial crisis, but we could. We could find a way out of it. But, obviously, at those times, there's no way that Reagan would have even thought that we would have gone into $19 trillion of debt. So now we are in this kind of debt, and I want to actually specifically talk about why we can't win a Cold War the same way. And the reason is because we are already economically weakened. We have such a weak economy now. First of all, one of the biggest growth sectors that we have here in our country is the service industry. So we have low-paying wage jobs that are employing people. So, and in addition to our unemployment numbers, the way that the unemployment works is that it's counting who is applying for unemployment. It's not counting people who've dropped out of the workforce entirely, and it doesn't count people who are underemployed. So maybe you had a nice banking position, and probably not a good excuse, probably not a good example. Let's go with let's say you had a nice corporate position. How about that? And in this corporate position, you were making a buttload of money, and now you got laid off, and you're working at McDonald's or something. All right, that you're underemployed compared to what you should be. So, but that's not counted as unemployment. You're underemployed. You're not making what you once were. You're making a lot less, but it still counts. And in addition to that, with Obamacare causing companies to cut back on their amount of full-time employees, you may now have to be working 2 part-time jobs just to get the same amount of money from one full-time wage, and you probably don't have any health benefits, so now you're having to pay for your health insurance because it's not covered because you're not a full-time employee, and maybe you can't afford that, and now you're being penalized for not being able to afford something in your taxes at the end of the year. You see how this is all kind of connected. It just keeps going and going and going. So anyway, the reason why we can't win with Russia in a Cold War is because we can't spend that much more, because the GDP, that's the national income, that's how much money we make from things that we produce, is actually less than the amount of money that we owe in debt. So let me bring up an article here real fast. I want to just read this for you so you guys can actually get an idea of our total debt to our gross domestic product ratio here. Right now, according to this, in 2015, this looks like it was in, let's see, what month is this? September? Yeah, this is in September. So our GDP is, 110% or no, 103% of our debt. So the total public debt as a percentage of the gross domestic product. So we're actually spending more. We have more in debt that we're adding to the deficit than what we currently are making as a country as far as national wealth. Okay, so we're spending more than we're making. That's a simple thing for us to understand. If you were, just looking at a regular family's income, all right, you're spending more than what you're making, and you're putting more on your credit card than what you're earning in that same given period. The problem is that you can't look at the total amount of income that you're earning and say, oh, we're good as long as we don't exceed that, which we are, by the way. First of all, we're exceeding the amount of income that we're earning. But the left, their argument is that as long as you don't exceed this, the debt is okay. But that's not necessarily the truth, because you have to look at how much money is actually going to be used to pay off the debt, and that is the tax revenue coming in. So what the left does is they say, look at the GDP. Again, that's how much we're all making throughout the whole whatever time span you're talking about. The GDP is the total nation's wealth. And what I'm talking about is the tax revenue. So how much of that GDP is the government taxing us? Because right now we're spending, adding to the deficit, more than 100% of what we're earning. So more than 100% of what we're earning is being spent into debt. And the issue here is that we're not even collecting 100% of that national income. Even if we did, there's such thing as a Laffer curve, where people will just move away. They'll stop paying taxes. And there'll be a mass migration. A bunch of companies leaving, which means jobs will leave. You can't tax people at 100% rates. There's a certain percentage that it becomes harder for you to collect your tax money than it does. If you're under that. So you could have 100% tax rate and actually earn less income through tax revenue for a government. It's called the Laffer curve. Feel free to look it up. Greece is experiencing the Laffer curve right now because they're having a hard time collecting their taxes because their rates are so high. So anyway, with this, we're seeing this is laying out the groundwork for an economic collapse. As this debt increases and gets more and more money on the bill here, we're not able to actually meet our interest payments on this debt itself. This will put us in a really tight spot. If we default on our loan here, a default will cause huge global crisis, and it will really call into question the credibility of the United States government, and we'll lose the global currency. I mean, there's all of these things that are linked, and this house of cards is primed right now to come down. So let's talk specifically about the economy. First of all, Mark, being an entrepreneur yourself, I'm just curious, how do you think the economy is doing right now? Do you think jobs are good? Do you think everything's stable or is getting better or getting worse?
I do, honestly. I think this is an interesting dynamic, considering what I'm hearing from you is not what I'm seeing. And so I think this is a way that maybe we can have a bit of a debate. I don't think that things are that bad economically until we really start to look at the debt. Once we really start to look at the debt, that's where things have gotten to be, it's really difficult to have problems if you were in a situation of an unlimited credit card. In other words, I can pretty much spend my way out of trouble if I'm able to get the credit for it. What you had said is that not only are you looking at just the national debt itself, but when we look at and add in all of the expenditures that are liabilities, unfunded liabilities, such as the entitlement programs like Medicare and Medicaid, those are the things that will eventually get us, bankrupt us, unless something dramatically changes. Now, I don't know that this is necessarily an intentional situation from the powers that be. Because when I look at the United States, I see there's so many dynamics to the economy itself that it makes it hard for me to go, okay, there's one central power that's kind of doing all of this. Although if you look at central banks, there's some argument for that. But the United States itself has really gone on a really long track record of economic growth. Sure, a lot of the people that you're talking about in terms of falling off the rolls and not even counting, whereas if you counted them, the unemployment rate might be a lot higher, or full employment rate might not be as nearly as much. But when I see it in terms of manufacturing, I see it in terms of service, I see it in terms of technology, I see it in terms of healthcare, things have actually gotten a lot better over the past 10 years than worse. But the major caveat is exactly what you're talking about. Where I was getting a little confused is when you're talking about GDP versus annual revenue of what we're bringing in terms of taxes. Because our debt, we're definitely spending, as far as we're racking up a deficit every year. And our total amount of debt is more than 1 year's total GDP. And then if you think about it, every single person who touches an Atlantic state, everybody who lives in a state that touches the Atlantic Ocean, 100% of their tax dollars are going towards just interest on the national debt. And so if you think about it, eventually that, the states are going to start creeping inland, and eventually, like you said, we're not even going to be able to pay off the interest on the debt, which will thus bankrupt us. That's where martial law kicks in. That's where the banning of the guns kicks in. That's where the world war kicks in. That's where all of those kinds of things that start to happen then you start to go, is there a bigger hand that's being played into this, or is this just a perfect storm of economic failure by our politicians?
Well, as George Soros says, the biggest stumbling block to a new world order is the American people, our government, our power, and our influence. And if we are weakened, which at this point we are either being led by a bunch of bumbling idiots, and I find that very, very hard to believe when you consider the information that they have. I'm just some guy with a computer and an internet connection. That's really all. And I'm able to figure out that the writing is on the wall with this. And what they're doing is leading us to a path of destruction. And they're calling for more. They're calling for more regulations. This is the thing. If you have an economic crisis, all right. Like, for example, look at Louisiana. This is a great example. Louisiana, they've been hit hard. They got hit with Hurricane Katrina and then the BP oil spill, and a lot of the jobs that were dependent on the ocean went away. They just went away. So Bobby Jindal, the governor over there, he's going for a free market solution. Now, granted, they are receiving a lot of federal funding right now, and they have been over the past decade or so been receiving a lot of federal funding. But what they're doing is they're deregulating their market over there in order to increase competition and encourage people to actually create jobs in their state. And it's working. They're bringing more people into the state. The free market is actually encouraging growth and development in that area. That way, when the time comes for them to pull the federal funding, they'll be okay because they'll have jobs. They'll have done things to get the government out of the way and allow people to actually create the wealth that consists of the GDP. If you come up with regulations and impediments to create wealth, if you have all these different things that are in people's way, in the entrepreneurs, the innovators' way, you're going to have less wealth. First of all, when you tax something, you get less of it. So you're going to have less people creating these jobs. And you're going to really hurt yourself. And we're not even talking about just the debt. The point is that as more things get regulated, there will be less wealth created. And it just seems like they're ratcheting up the things that they want to regulate. And that's not even talking about the climate change movement. If you look at the climate change movement, and if that thing gains more steam, we're in a lot of trouble, gang. Kiss your job goodbye. There's not going to be very much left for us to do, and we're going to be left with this huge amount of debt that we're passing down to our children and no way to pay it off.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is quite a glass half empty beginning of the show, but you're kind of right. I mean, there's just so much crap that's going on. I mean, even if you're just looking at the Middle East and how this could easily be a World War III. That being said, all of these other problems seem a little more infinitesimal, but then when you combine them with everything that you've just mentioned, it doesn't seem to be like something that we can just get out of. That being said, when it comes to a New World Order, you can look at those in two different ways. You can look at it as like a big conspiratorial thing for, the Council on Foreign Relations and, a number of people in the central banking system and, and looking at the island of Jekyll or whatever you're looking at, there's so many different ways of looking at that as far as, big governments wanting to just get together and, dominate with a one world currency and RFID chips and all this stuff. But then you can also look at this and say, yeah, they want a new world order where, we're not bombing one another, where we're economically interdependent upon one another, which is really what the majority of the world is getting towards. I mean, Bush Sr. said that he wanted a new world order in one of his presidential addresses. I think it was in a State of the Union. And he said it multiple times. So this wasn't something that was, too conspiratorial or like underground. I mean, he threw it out there. And I think what his intention or what he wanted the public to believe was that we are becoming a global economy. And so that's the new world order that he's speaking of, which is, we need to be a little bit more economically interdependent so we don't bomb one another. The problem that really rests in that is when you deal with treaties and when you deal with issues like religion, which are the primary problems I think we're facing right now in the Middle East. Because when you're talking about Sunni and Shiite, or when you're talking about Assad versus ISIS, or when you're talking about ISIS versus Turkey, or ISIS, within Turkey, or the factions within ISIS, or the factions within, Islam, or then you're looking at Turkey and Russia, and all of the different dynamics that you're looking at with that kind of throw this whole New World Order of a conspiratorial manner out the window and kind of bring it up to the idea of going, we do need hell of a lot more order, especially over there, if we're going to be doing anything as far as, succeeding in the future, don't you think?
Well, the problem here is I understand where you're coming from, and I'm not one to believe that there's a shadow government. I don't think that there's a big group of people like the Illuminati or something working behind the scenes, coordinating their efforts all for the same common goal. What I think is happening right now is there are many people that are colluding together that have common interests. And they believe that, some of them may believe that they're working together, and others believe that they're in it for themselves. Like, for example, George Soros. George Soros is in the power business. This guy, what does a billionaire who has everything want? More. That's what he wants, more. Power. He wants everything. He wants more. So I believe that's the kind of guy that we're dealing with when we talk about George Soros. And this guy has already toppled governments and destroyed economies. This guy has done these things purposefully and willfully. And right now, he is currently making bets against America in the financial markets. He's betting against America. And honestly, I think he's making efforts to actually make sure his bets are actually coming to fruition. I think that he's working to that end. And I don't necessarily know what the Obama administration's agenda, their final goal, what the grand picture of, because they've already said they wanted to fundamentally transform America. Well, what does that look like? What is the end goal? What is going to be left over at the end of this fundamental transformation? So I don't know, but it's a potential that it could be leading us to being weakened, leading us into a war with Russia, a global war where we're weakened. And this is maybe an accident, but I think if we are both weakened, us and Russia, the rest of the world weakened from a global war, ISIS will begin to spread. The Caliphate will spread as they are wanting to do, and we're going to be in some real problems. And after the dust settles, I think this is where the globalist kind of like New World Order people like George Soros, they believe after everyone's beat the crap out of each other, that a power vacuum will be created where a global government could be created and allow to prevent this horrible tragedy of global war from ever happening again. Imagine if there's nukes used. I'm telling you right now, if we have a nuclear exchange where two superpowers are nuking each other, we're talking about global governance at this point, because people will go crazy, throwing their liberties at the feet of their oppressors, waiting for them to protect them and keep them safe from ever happening again. I believe that will happen if we see nuclear exchange between two foreign powers. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's Albert Einstein said, I don't know what World War III is going to be fought with, but I know World War IV would be fought with sticks and rocks. And in other words, we could easily just wipe everything out if you're getting to that point. But I think, honestly, Russia isn't that stupid. I don't think the United States is that stupid. But I do think that there are these kinds of incentives, layers of incentives that kind of come in through, the opportunity of bureaucracy. And that's what really makes it pretty scary, in my opinion. And when you look at ISIS and how it's really rising up, and the moderates, which aren't really speaking out against it. And that's the thing that pisses me off the most, is that when you're looking at Indonesia, Turkey, big moderate, quote-unquote, Muslim countries that are really not, they're just kind of turning their head to what ISIS is doing. Granted, there's a lot of people out there that say, there are groups of people out there that are really upset about this. Sure, I mean, I can find a few hundred here and a few thousand there, but when you're dealing with 1.5 billion of people who are very fast growing, and their very big intent is to continue to grow very fast, just like a lot of religions do. But the idea of it is, when you're dealing with something like religion, there's no reasoning your way out of it. And so when all of these other things that start collapsing, not by necessarily an intention, I don't know that George Soros is intentionally trying to do this, but he does, he's a fund manager, he's a hedge fund manager. He makes money doing things where, when things go bad, he makes money. When things go good, he makes money. And so he likes to see both happen. That being said, I think it's just something where, we've really got to play our cards right, especially when it comes to the idea of how NATO and Russia are starting to work, because Russia's really pissed off. I mean, he didn't want Ukraine, turning NATO. He really threatened some big war when it comes to that too. So NATO's a big problem right now, and I think the United States is starting to understand that maybe these treaties might need to be having another look taken at them if we're going to be surviving as a nation. I mean, we've got to clean up our own backyard before we start helping others.
So this leads us to the conversation about the Fabian strategy, and I want to reiterate this, and I'm going to keep pounding this idea into people's heads. First of all, Mark, I gave Mark homework before the show. Did you get a chance to take a look at the Fabian strategy?
I sure did, absolutely. It's a pretty interesting one, as a matter of fact.
You want to give a rundown on how it pertains, in particular, to the history behind it. I'm going to keep repeating this, guys, so I want to have Mark do it, so you guys hear someone else explain it, someone who's
sure,
who's just learning about
it.
So
from what I understand is that Hannibal was really going in and striking through Rome, and Fabius Maximus was appointed by the Romans, and he basically knew that he couldn't just wipe out Hannibal on his own. He was way too big of an army, and Rome had some problems with it. But what he did is that he had little mini wars. It was kind of a death of 1,000 cuts. Let your opponent wear out of juice. I mean, it's kind of like how it reminds me of the boxing match between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali. George Foreman had way more power than Muhammad Ali. I mean, he just could beat the crap out of you if he got a hold of you. But Muhammad Ali just kind of made a few more dodges, blocked, and then eventually, once George Foreman ran out of air, he ran out of steam, that's when he went ahead and just started tagging away and won the fight. So this is the kind of thing when you look at it and say, what's wrong with the situation today? I mean, we're losing a death of 1,000 cuts just like Hannibal is. Is that kind of is that a good synopsis or no?
So my analogy here, and by the way, just a slight historical correction, Hannibal's army was actually not as large as the Roman army, but he kept denying them the decisive fight. He would attack them where they were not, and he was a very, very smart and excellent general. He never lost a battle, but he couldn't win the war, and the reason why he couldn't win the war is he got denied the decisive battles or the ability to attack soft targets that he was winning from. He kept attacking very weak targets, and then when he would attack strong targets, he would use misdirection and deception to actually defeat the opponents. By the way, one of the ways that he won, I found this is one of the most interesting battles about Hannibal, is he tied a bunch of torches to the horns of livestock, and it made the Romans think that the army was over there, and they really attacked from the other direction. It was at night and in the fog, and they couldn't see what was going on. All they could see is the torchlight. So all the Romans rushed to one side over there, and they were attacked from another side. So that is kind of the strategy of Hannibal. So in relation to today, what we see right now, we are spending and spending and spending. We're spending about $1 trillion. $1 trillion a year on our military. And if we go into a Cold War scenario with Russia and we're trying to actually, outspend Russia and get Russia to collapse like they did in the Soviet Union, first of all, that won't happen. We don't have the kind of ability to drain them the way that we did then. It will only lead to us becoming drained. So first of all, we need to pull back. We need to cut our losses in some areas that are losses, but we need to address why, first of all, we're there. So the very first thing, why do we care about the Middle East? Why do we care about Russia's involvement in the Middle East? All of this boils down to oil and energy. That's it. We're sitting on hundreds of years worth of natural resources at our feet right now. We do not need foreign oil, and we can pump our own oil. We can do offshore drilling. We can do oil drilling in Canada. I'm sorry, not Canada, Alaska. We can do fracking, all of that stuff, and survive off of our own spoils. In addition to that, that creates something that we're exporting, which will help us out with the financial problems that we're experiencing, the economic pains that we have, because right now we currently import a lot more than we export, which is why we have situations where China buys our debt, because they're basically doing it in a way that again, I'm not an economic expert here, and I'm just starting to learn this process with the way they do it, but basically we don't have to convert to buy our exports, our imports, in whatever foreign currency that is. We do it by paying in these loan guarantees, basically, and the Chinese government then buys those guarantees from the companies, the companies that we bought the products from, with U.S. dollars that they have. That's why China's buying up our debt, because they have all these U.S. dollars that they're able to buy stuff in. But all of that stuff, we won't have to do all of that stuff if we're actually exporting goods, because then people will have U.S. dollars to actually buy our products with. So, we'll be able to buy their stuff, and they'll be able to buy our stuff. Anyway, that's the kind of complicated stuff that I'm trying to wrap my mind around myself here. So, regardless, we'll be producing energy, and that means that we won't care about what's going on in the Middle East as far as the oil, as far as Russia. If we don't have to worry about Russia threatening our interest, and we don't have to worry about sponsoring terrorism by buying oil that is linked to, first of all, dictatorships or terroristic regimes, like, for example, Iran, who's a state sponsor of terrorism, which, by the way, I guess we are too here in America, because we've created ISIS, and we're going to get to that later. But anyway, that would mean that we don't have to worry about what's going on there. We can worry about what's going on here. And I'm not talking about being isolationist. I'm not saying we just, do Fortress America and don't worry, we're not going to talk to anybody. We're not going to have any alliances. Again, beware of foreign entanglements doesn't mean have no friends. It doesn't mean don't be willing to protect your interest overseas. That's not what it means. It means don't have alliances with people who don't like you and may drag you into a war that you probably shouldn't get into. Like, for example, Turkey. They're not really our greatest friends. And we're going to get to that as well. So as far as my idea for Fabian's strategy, we take the money that we would be spending, giving it foreign money, foreign aid to countries that don't like us, like Pakistan, for example. We take this money and we no longer give it to them. Maybe we don't even collect it in the first place, so our tax burden is lower. Or we put it into the hardening of the power grid to protect us from an electromagnetic pulse, which is bound to happen. I mean, that's a concern, and we're really vulnerable with that. I've seen estimates that said it will take somewhere between $100 million and $2 billion to harden up the entire power grid. But it's not an all or nothing thing. We can do it piecemeal. We can get sections here and there that we can actually harden that way, and we don't have to spend that $2 billion all at once. So anyway, we worry about ourselves as far as foreign aid. The money to people that don't like us, we stop paying it. We stop having alliances, strategic alliances with people who don't like us either. We need to press a reset button on all of our foreign relations and talk to everybody who we're currently allied with and find out, who's really worth fighting for, to defend, who's really going to back us up, and who really cares about America. And then we redraw these lines in the sand. There may be some people that are left out that were part of NATO, that were part of the United Nations, which, by the way, I don't think we should be part of either of those. And we worry about securing our interest. And we have trade with everybody. We'll conduct trade with everybody, especially if we are the alternative to oil. If we're producing our own oil, if Russia does try to strong-arm a country out there that they have influence over, or someone else, even if it's our friend, at least producing our own oil will give us an alternative, or give those people, our friends, an alternative to Russia, because Russia will, as soon as we leave the Middle East, Russia's going to sweep it up. They're going to take control over that area, those strategic resources, and they're going to get a foothold in that region in order to be able to twist people's arms. If we give other countries the option, if we give them the choice of, you can do business with Russia, who's trying to coerce you and twist your arm, or you can do business with us and have free trade, I think we're going to be better off. In addition to that, the Fabian strategy, we deregulate and try to bring our economy back. We try to increase the growth of the GDP, and we do this by getting the government out of the way of it and deregulating. And I think that's the solution. But I don't think that will happen. And Mark, I want to hear, because this is the first time that you and I have had this discussion. Where am I wrong on this? Where do you think I'm wrong here, if anywhere?
I don't know that I think you're wrong. I'm not sure that the strategy is just going to work. And the idea that I think that when it comes to the idea that, oh gosh, everybody is just nobody's too. This isn't about being stupid. This is about having incentives. And I think the incentives of the layers of government that we have and the layers of government that any other nation has in addition to, militarily, certain orders will conflict with others, certain things will conflict with others. And so there's really, in terms of a strategy, because things are so dynamic right now, one really doesn't have an understanding of what could actually happen. I mean, we can list out all the different possibilities, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a strategy that's going to work for any one of them. I like what you're talking about because I don't think that we can win this just on a military front. ISIS is way too powerful in the way that, if just 8 people can frighten an entire world, or at least a few nations and, our nation, then you're looking at a pretty big deal when it comes to what could be happening, especially when it comes to a religious war. So I don't know that you're necessarily wrong in terms of the theory behind it. I think it's a great strategy about, how one would fight a dynamic war like this. But I also don't know what the actual solution is because, again, there's just so many different incentives on so many different levels of government. How is one to, really provide the best solution for one nation when that solution might be completely contradictory to the other solution?
So as far as the situation with ISIS, I do believe that even within the Fabian strategy, you take targets of opportunity out. So I don't have any problem with us bombing in Syria to destroy ISIS. I have no issue with that. I have an issue with us creating ISIS to begin with, which is why I see that the Obama administration is not really interested in actually taking out ISIS targets. We did 18 airstrikes a day, and that does not necessarily mean that we're actually bombing anything on those airstrikes. They're actually 18 sorties a day. So that doesn't mean that anything was actually bombed in that sortie. And in fact, there's been reports from pilots that are saying that near 70% of the missions that they go on, and they have targets that are clear and there's not going to be any collateral damage, they have opportunities to take out ISIS targets. 70% of the time the Obama administration calls them back and tells them, no, don't take those targets. So this is concerning. This to me seems like the Obama administration is not trying to actually win the war. Again, there's hundreds of targets that we know about that are ISIS targets that we're not bombing, and that's just because we're not serious about this. And the reason is because they want to use ISIS and the rebels as a way to get the Assad regime out of power because it's a Russian interest to do so. It's also an Iranian interest to do so, by the way. For those of you who are not aware, Iran is a Shiite country, Shiite majority country, and the Assad regime is they're essentially Shiite, but they're called Alawite, I believe is how you pronounce that, and they're a Shiite spinoff that is off of Shiite. So they're anti-Sunni essentially, and if you didn't know, Sunnis are ISIS. ISIS is Sunni. So is Turkey, and so is the anti-Assad Turkmen that are in Syria right now that Turkey has been supporting, and we're going to get to that some more. The Muslim Brotherhood is Sunni, and there's 40 countries from Morocco to Indonesia that are Sunni. You got Al-Qaeda that's Sunni, Saudi Arabia that's Sunni, Taliban, they're Sunni. And I believe like 85% of Muslims in the Middle East are Sunni. So again, this is one of those things that it's concerning that we're not actually attacking targets of opportunity. The Fabian strategy, it allows for you to attack targets of opportunity. We don't need to put boots on the ground. We just need to make their lives harder, make their lives a living hell, and get out of the way of the Assad regime. Stop actively trying to take down the Assad regime. Yeah, Assad's a bad guy. Yeah, what helps Assad helps Russia and Iran. That's not a good thing. That's not a good thing for us. However, if we just get our own oil, if we produce our own oil, and we get off of the addiction from foreign oil, first of all, that will hurt them. Russia's economy is based on oil. So if there's not a demand for foreign oil and we're producing our own oil, that will be harmful to Russia. Their entire economy is based on oil. So if we lower the amount of money per barrel of oil, that's detrimental to them. In addition, it's detrimental to Iran, and it's detrimental to ISIS, who is selling oil, by the way, probably to Turkey. And we'll We're going to get to that as well. So lots of other stuff on the agenda. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and cut to a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about the relationship between Turkey and ISIS, and I want to talk about the Sunni-Shia split. So you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. If you want to give us a call, you want to join the conversation, feel free to do that. The number is 360-450-5625. We got Lou on Twitter who says, Obama is making us a socialist country by UN design. You know, it seems to me that this is a giant power grab, and this is, again, if your goal is to weaken America, first of all, as the president of the United States, you're actively acting against the United States, which, I mean, I would consider that treason. I'm not necessarily making accusations here, but if you are actively trying to take American power down a notch, you're actively going against American interests. So yeah. But anyway, as far as the globalist kind of thing, again, I don't know if there's, I'm not saying that there's like an Illuminati New World Order group out there, something like that, Bilderberg, all this stuff. I'm not saying that there's some group that is collectively, all of them secretly pulling the strings behind the government. What I'm saying is that there are people colluding. And I don't think that they're all colluding for the same reasons. I think some of them think that maybe they're doing the right thing. I think some of them think that they're just doing something that's only going to work out in their interest. Like, for example, Soros. I think Soros wants to topple America and make a lot more money and have a lot more power globally as a result. And I think that there's people who, maybe just want to create some kind of balance. Some people that just don't like America. Like Obama. I don't think Obama really likes America, and I think he has a lot of resentment towards America. So anyway, I want to go through here and actually talk specifically about the relationship between Turkey and ISIS. First of all, we already covered that Turkey is first of all, they are anti-Russia, all right, and they're also anti-Kurd. So and that's another group that's fighting in Syria, is the Kurds. They're up north. And Turkey is Sunni, so is ISIS, so is the Turkmen that Turkey is helping. They're like a rebel group that's right across the border from Turkey in Syria, and they've been getting some protection from Turkey in Syria. And all right, so let's go ahead and actually dig into some of these articles here I have. So Turkey's relationship with America and the rest of NATO, for example. I want to talk about this moment that happened after the Paris attack. Now, there was a soccer game where there was a lot of noise. I can't understand what they're saying. I don't speak the language, but I have a clip here of someone who's making some excuses. This is from the Young Turks. I don't like this show. It's not my favorite show out there or anything. But I wanted to give you an example of people who make excuses for bad behavior, and particularly the bad behavior from some people in the Muslim community. And I want to give you an example of what they're saying. What is the reason? Because people were saying that these Turkish fans, during the moment of silence, were either booing or yelling Allah Akbar, which is not what they said apparently. But here's the clip.
During the Greece versus Turkey soccer game recently, there was a moment of silence that was endorsed by the soccer organization behind the game. Okay, so according to the San Francisco Chronicle, the UEFA, Europe's governing soccer body, requested that all European international games hold a minute of silence before the start of their matches and wear black armbands. Now, that is the most common sense thing to do. Of course, you want to show solidarity with the victims in France. There's nothing wrong with that.
And I will agree. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think it's particularly helpful. I don't think it matters. I don't think that moments of silence are going to change anything. I think the only moments of silence that we need to be discussing are the victims of these terrorists who are now silent, and the people who are not speaking out against radical Islam. Those two moments of silence, I feel, are very important that we really need to focus on. The people who are now dead because of radical Islam, and the people who refuse to speak out about it. Those are the two moments of silence that we really need to be focusing on. But yeah, look, there's nothing wrong with a moment of silence. Showing solidarity, it doesn't really do anything. It just makes you feel good, I guess. Okay? Yeah, that's cool. But, if I was involved in a moment of silence, if there was a moment of silence going on around me, is for victims, okay, yeah, I'd be silent. I would just sit there respectfully and be silent. Even if I disagreed necessarily with the moment of silence taking place, or I had something that I felt I needed to say, yada, 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 I would keep my mouth shut out of respect for the victims.
However, if you look at the next video, you'll see that not everyone in the audience was a fan of this moment of silence. Take a look.
So that is a moment of silence. Did that sound silent to you? Maybe it's a cultural thing. Maybe they don't understand what a moment of silence is. Let's hear from an expert, apparently.
There's controversy because the Turkish soccer fans were not silent. They were waving their flags and they were yelling. Some are saying that they were booing, although I couldn't really hear whether or not it was booing or if they were just being loud and obnoxious during a clear moment of silence to show respect and solidarity with victims. Now, whether or not they're booing, I don't care. What they did was disrespectful. What they did was disgusting, okay? And I don't know what else to say about that.
It's hard to say that they were booing. I don't watch a lot of soccer matches, let alone international soccer matches, but that sounds to me like what I imagine the stadium sounds like all the time.
Right. As your Turkish correspondent and the only Turkish person at the Young Turks, let me clarify what happened there. They were actually yelling, "Şehitler ölmez, vatan bölünmez."
Oh, obviously.
Which means martyrs don't die and the country never separates. And this is a common theme throughout our history because Turkey has always had terror attacks from terrorist groups like PKK, which are predominantly Kurds, but then also from ISIS, and especially until in recent times as well in Ankara, when there was an ISIS bombing where 100 people died and 400 people were injured. And that's like a saying that we have because we believe that people that die in terrorist attacks are also martyrs alongside our military that fights terror groups, right? So they weren't exactly booing. They weren't like booing the fact that Paris was bombed, and it wasn't a show of like being non-sympathetic. It was more
potentially solidarity. Basically.
Yeah, but at the same time, but then again, it's a complex political issue because Turkey is predominantly Sunni, and so is ISIS. And ISIS has a common kind of enemy within Turkey. Like I said, it's complex, and this might sound a little insensitive, but the ISIS attacks Kurds, which Kurds usually have been known to attack within Turkish borders, right? So some of the very radical conservative Muslims in the crowd might genuinely be booing in support of ISIS. And I'm not going to rule that out. However, the coverage is a little biased from the Western media because they weren't yelling Allahu Akbar. They were genuinely yelling, like, martyrs don't die, and the country doesn't.
To the extent that they were yelling Allahu Akbar, that doesn't. People in America seem to think if you say that, you are about to explode. But that's not what you can say it in all sorts of circumstances.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah.
Any Christian would yell out things like that in English. It doesn't mean that they're terrorists.
I don't care what they were saying. No, I do care what they were saying, because if they were booing or if they were saying something disrespectful, it makes the situation even worse, okay? But I'm not having a conversation about the complex issues between Turkey and ISIS and the Kurds. No, you're at a soccer game, okay? They're having a moment of silence to show respect to the victims of this terrible, tragic terrorist
I agree. It
violence.
was inappropriate regardless.
So I'm happy that somebody brought that back home. This is not a complicated issue. You are at a soccer game, okay? You're at a soccer game. They ask you to be quiet, to have a moment of silence for victims of a terror attack. And the Turks start screaming, start yelling, all right, start whistling. This sounds like what you would imagine, as the gentleman said, what a stadium would sound like at any given moment, but not during a moment of silence. So, you can try to justify it however you'd like, and that's fine, and you'll see that this gentleman is doing that. Again, he goes into all the complexities that you and I, we just don't understand. We're just too stupid to get. This is so complex. I mean, the relationship between the Kurds, the Sunni Shia split, all this stuff. No, we're talking about a moment of silence. A moment of silence. So if you refuse to be silent during a moment of silence, you are saying something. And it doesn't matter what you actually are saying during the moment of silence. Your lack of silence says a lot. So let me actually try to turn this around here and discuss something I find particularly interesting. And it's our relationship with Turkey that I am calling into question. We are, first of all, a NATO ally. And granted, Turkey does have some benefits, some strategic benefits for us to be friends with. However, I don't think that we should be throwing the full weight of our military behind backing Turkey when we are now concerned with this. Russian jets just carried out a heavy raid in Syria's northern Latakia and Aleppo provinces on Wednesday, a day after Turkey downed one of Moscow's jets in the area. So, Russian warplanes have since last night been carrying out heavy airstrikes on the Jabal Akrad and Jabal Turkmen regions in North Latakia. I can't say this stuff anyway. Sorry, I'm going to slaughter this, guys. Syria Observatory for Human Rights Chief Rami Abdel Rahman. Turkey's state-run Anadolu news agency reported that 7 people were killed and 10 wounded in strikes that it hit a Turkish convoy taking supplies to refugees in town on Wednesday. So, reportedly, Turkey is giving supplies to the Turkmen. Okay, and I was trying to figure out who the heck are the Turkmen, so I did some research, found it out. Let me bring up the Britannica. .com article here. Turkmen people who speak the language belonging to the southwestern branch of Turkic languages. The majority live in Turkmenistan and neighboring parts of Central Asia and number more than 6 million at the beginning of the 21st century. Long story short, the Turkmen are now living in Syria. The Turkmen rebels, anyway, they're living in Syria. They're one of the many interest groups that are fighting in Syria, and the Turkish government has been basically protecting them, acting as a protectorate of them, and they were one of the people. The Turkmens are one of the people that Russia was bombing. So now there's some conflict here between Turkey and Russia. Turkey's seeing this as Russia acting against Turkey's interest, and even though it's not in Turkey, they're bombing them. this is a problem. Russia's saying that these convoys, these supply runs that Turkey's conducting, they're actually giving supplies to not only Turkey but to ISIS directly. And let me actually play a clip here. I have a conversation that has of course now I can't find it. Oh, this is awesome. There's a video from Wesley Clark talking about how he believes that Turkey has been aiding ISIS. And wow, I cannot believe I lost this video. This is nuts. All right, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna move on here for a second. We'll come back to that. But anyway, Turkey is potentially giving aid to ISIS. In addition to that, the oil that ISIS is providing them the oil that ISIS is making through their use of the oil that they've taken over is potentially being bought by Turkey. So I mean, this is pretty concerning. It's something that I think we should be paying attention to, huh? I mean, it doesn't seem like a good idea that one of our allies, is buying supplies from our enemy that they supposedly are against. And again, the Sunni Shia split here. Sunnis stick together, and so do Shias. So Turkey is a Sunni, so is ISIS, so are the Turkmen, so is the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way. And we got a lot of stuff to get to on this here. I'm gonna try to track this down. I'm gonna actually, let's see. I have another clip I can play in the meantime while I'm tracking this down. Nope, can't get to that yet. All right, so. Let's see here. First of all, let me play this clip while I'm looking for the other one here. This is the Dakota Myers. This guy is a Medal of Honor recipient and an American hero. He was actually threatened by ISIS. Okay, this is one of our guys, living Medal of Honor recipients. He's been threatened by ISIS, and he pulled over on the side of the highway, made a YouTube video to respond to it. Here's a clip.
So I'm not big on these videos, but as you can see, I had to stop and pull over on the side of the road to be safe with it. You know, I just read about the latest warning from ISIS that they have trained soldiers in 15 states that are awaiting orders. They're trained. Well, I have a warning to you, ISIS. We have trained soldiers in all 50 states that are trained. They're armed. We have also disgruntled veterans in all 50 states that are armed and trained, and that have been actually the same guys who've been kicking your ass for the last 14 years on your own turf, and have been waiting for the opportunity for you to come over and try to bring your beliefs to the greatest country in the face of the earth.
Okay, so that is Dakota Meyer. He's basically threatening the Islamic State as well. He's returning the threats. First of all, I have to say, it's pretty brave of him to do that. I'm sure, he's probably already considered an ISIS target just for the sheer fact of his involvement in the war. But okay, I found the clip from General Wesley Clark talking about Turkey supporting ISIS. So this is extremely important. Again, this is the former NATO commander. All right, this is a big deal. Okay, he's the former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, General Wesley Clark, talking about Turkey potentially supporting ISIS. Here's a clip.
General,
and so there's a geostrategic context.
General, are you suggesting that Vladimir Putin had a point then when he suggested that Turkey, in a way, was aiding ISIS?
Well, all along there's always been the idea that Turkey was supporting ISIS in some way. We know they've funneled people going through Turkey to ISIS. Someone's buying that oil that ISIS is selling. It's going through somewhere. It looks to me like it's probably going through Turkey. But the Turks haven't acknowledged that.
Okay, so that is General Wesley Clark talking about, Turkey potentially buying this oil, in addition to them supplying with supplies to ISIS, and this could even call into the question if for somehow, some way, Turkey is ideologically aligned with ISIS, which again they're both Sunnis, and Sunnis typically look out for each other. then we could have a potential for them to be trying to draw us into a world war. We already know that ISIS wants us to be weakened by fighting amongst ourselves while they grow strong. So if Turkey is in fact colluding with ISIS, this is a problem. I'm not necessarily saying they are, but I'm not necessarily saying they aren't either. We're joined once again because he apparently dropped off the line. Mark, you there?
I sure am. Sorry about that.
No worries, man. I understand, technical glitches and all that good stuff. So,
I tell you, the moment we were talking about no conspiracy, and then I'm thinking, this is twice now that I've had technical difficulties. You think they're listening and they want to shut me off? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Hey, every time I have a glitch, I blame it on George Soros. So
there we go.
so what's going on right now? We were just talking about how Turkey is potentially colluding with ISIS. We had former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. We had General Wesley Clark talking about how Turkey is potentially buying ISIS oil. We just covered an article where Turkey has been supplying rebels, or they're saying refugees or victims in Syria with supplies, and Russia is saying that they're giving supplies and resources to ISIS, and Russia has bombed some of these convoys. First of all, what do you think, Mark? What do you think about this?
Well, it's interesting because I read that so much as 60% of Turkey's energy comes from Russia in the form of oil and coal and other forms of energy. And so the idea behind the fact that, if you are going to go and bomb a country that isn't going to like that too much, they may as well impose some economic sanctions or just stop funneling your energy to you. You've got to find alternate resources. And that's what I'm saying. The religion of this is the scariest part, because I don't know that will defy all of the logic and the reasoning that most countries will be operating under. So even if they are a quote-unquote moderate Muslim country, if they're on the same side in terms of how they believe, or that, non-believers should perish, or, worse, there are a number of reasons to believe that Turkey is kind of wanting this thing to blow up in the face of the United States and Russia. This is the only way that you can really be powerful. A size of a country like that is when you're dealing with a terrorist regime that doesn't see any boundaries. All it sees is, its religious ways, and they're willing to die for what they're doing, as opposed to, protect themselves for what they're doing.
Exactly. And, I've been debating whether or not I want to actually play this clip that I have for. It's Islamic propaganda. It's ISIS propaganda. Basically, I've decided I'm not going to play it. I don't want to give them any more free press. But the video depiction basically is, they are telling us why they're killing us. They're telling us that they're killing us because we are infidels, and it is their religious beliefs, if they follow the literal interpretation of the Hadith and the Quran, that they can kill us, they can lie to us, they can rape our women, they can enslave us. All of that is what they are entitled and obligated to do, honestly, if they believe in this interpretation, and that all of the Muslims have to come together, and if you are a Muslim who's not Muslim enough, they're entitled to kill you as well. And this is an issue when you start rallying behind, and essentially this is going to cause Sunnis to rally to each other. ISIS is a threat to Shiites because it's Sunni, and Shiite countries such as Iran, Iraq, and Bahrain. There's a lot of other ones. Lebanon, for example, they're Shiite countries. Also, by the way, Assad is Shiite. I mentioned this when you dropped off the line. Assad is Shiite. He's actually part of a sect called the Alawites. And that's another reason why the Syrian rebels, who are Sunnis, and the ISIS themselves are against Assad as well. So this schism is particularly important when you start talking about why this fight is happening. But basically, that you have the U.S. rebels that are in Syria. You have the Assad government, you have ISIS, you have the Kurds, you have Turkey that has interest there with the Turkmen that they're trying to protect, and all of this is created because this is a power vacuum. This power vacuum has created all these interests. Now you have Russia that's involved, trying to back up their interests with the Assad regime. America's involved because first of all we created ISIS by arming them through Benghazi and providing them with funds. Then we also are backing the rebels that are trying to take the fight to the Assad regime as well. On the other side, you got the Assad regime that's basically pinned in, and they're getting attacked from all sides. And then again, you have the Kurds who are up north, and they've actually been taking the fight to ISIS, and they actually like us. These are the people that if we're going to arm, if we wanted to arm anyone, we should arm the Kurds. But because the Kurds in Turkey have a conflict, we don't want to arm the Kurds because Turkey would get upset with us. Well, Turkey's trying to get us involved in a freaking war with Russia right now, and I think that's going against our interests. They blinked. This is what the situation was. Russia was playing a game of chicken with them. Putin was challenging them, and by crossing the border, and he got them to show weakness by shooting down the plane. That's not an act of strength. That's an act of weakness. If somebody's crossing over your border very quickly, even if you warn them dozens of times, I don't care how many times you've warned them. If they're not moving towards one of your cities and they're not being a direct threat to you, they're probing you. And to take an act of aggression like that, is a sign of weakness. And Turkey's acting in a really unstable way for us to have an alliance with them. I think that they're acting against our interest, and I'm concerned about the relationship that they have with ISIS, particularly because they are Sunni majority country, and they're apparently buying ISIS oil, according to General Wesley Clark, and they're also, potentially, according to Russia, giving supplies to ISIS. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, it's really it's so complex because when you start to see all of the different layers there, I think I sent you a video just recently about how all of this got started, which was in 11. When you had the rebels who were rising up, all they were doing was peaceful protests, and then Assad had a bunch of them slaughtered. And so, Obama goes in there and says, "All right, we're going to draw a line in the sand," and then Russia comes in and goes, "Well, not so fast." And then Obama blinks and says, "All right, well, no." And so I think that really did show a very big really where we're standing here, and that when we elect a president with 2 years of Senate experience and no executive experience, this is kind of what you get. You get somebody who backs down. But what would you have done? Would you have just continued to go in and call his bluff? That's a scary thing. And so he's developed this.
In particular, in relation to what? What are you asking? I just want to double check what the question was here.
Well, so basically, Russia comes in and says, "No, you're not going to mess with Assad." And for one reason or another, either he's pairing with them because Assad's against ISIS, or he's just pairing with them because of the fact that it's the kind of thing that would just stir up the hornet's nest with Obama. Putin's just an ass. The kind of guy that does things, in my opinion, just to shake things up.
I'm going to majorly disagree with you on this point.
Tell me about it.
We are the asses in this situation. We are the aggressors. We are the problem here. And I need to make this very clear. If you're listening right now, you're going to get ginned up in the future here. We're being set up to get attacked. We are wide open. And this administration wants to have the justification to get into Syria, to get into a global war with Russia. In my opinion, now, Mark, you maybe disagree with me, but I think that they want us to be in war. And they're putting us in these positions to create instability, which will force our hand, supposedly, to get into this area, which we rejected. The American people said, no, we don't care what's going on in Syria. We don't want involved in that already. Now, the only way that we're going to get involved in that is if we're attacked. And if the only way that we stay attacked, or we actually have a heightened threat to be attacked, is if we do nothing about ISIS, which is what this administration is doing, and we start talking about doing reckless things like importing thousands of Syrian refugees who could come here and attack us from within. So
right.
It's very concerning because what you're talking about, the instability that Russia, you say Russia's doing things just to cause instability. No. We are doing things to cause instability. We caused instability with Egypt, and we supported the wrong guys. We supported the Muslim Brotherhood, by the way, in Egypt.
Yeah, I have to agree with you on that, especially because, we really shouldn't, there are a lot of reasons why, we shouldn't have been there in the first place, and I think that, maybe Putin is kind of taking a stand and saying, hey, look, well, I'm not going to have this kind of Western domination anymore. He wants more of an Eastern bloc, or he wants more of an Eastern, alliance, what he's trying to work with China, and I think you're right. It's the kind of thing where maybe he's kind of coming in and going, not so fast, you guys, this isn't... you guys got to stop messing with things. Is that kind of what you're saying? Is that Putin's coming in there and saying, I'm going to be the police to the policemen of the world because all you guys are doing is messing things up?
Yeah, well, first of all, he's got an interest with Syria. So he's got two interests here. First of all, he's got an interest with Syria, and he's also got an interest in keeping the Middle East stabilized because he wants that oil. He would prefer if the stability went in his favor, where he's the one that has access and control over the oil and has the foothold in the Middle East. And we're doing, from the Obama administration standpoint, we're doing everything in our power to discredit ourselves with these Middle Eastern countries, because if they look at what we're doing, we're creating instability. If I was Saudi Arabia, I'd be looking at Russia as well. I'd be like, well, look, Russia seems like they care more about stability, so we want, instead of falling to American protection, we want to fall to Russian protection and essentially become a protectorate of Russia. And that's what we're doing. We're basically letting everyone in the Middle East know that we are not a stabilizing force. We're a disruptive force in the region. Russia's saying, no, I want stability. You're not taking out my guy in Syria. That's where I'm drawing the line. And he's picked a side. Out of all the interests that are involved in this power vacuum in the Middle East and Syria, he's picked a side. And he's doing everything in his power to make sure that side is going to prevail. So if we look at who's actually been gaining ground, since all of this happened, since Russia got involved, there has been a lot of activity, a lot of bombing from Russia from the rebel-controlled regions that are essentially behind the Assad regime's control. Assad, he basically controls, a portion of Aleppo, and a portion of that is controlled by the rebels, and he controls a big portion south and to the east of Aleppo, and it goes down to this highway. ISIS has taken this southern highway, taken control of that, and it's contested between the Assad regime and ISIS. ISIS is on the other side. Basically, Assad is pinned in Aleppo between rebel-controlled area and ISIS-controlled area. So what Putin is trying to do right now is to eliminate people on one side. Well, the easiest target is the rebels, and he's bombing the crap out of these U.S.-backed rebels, which, by the way, are responsible for shooting down one of the helicopters that came to rescue the pilot that was shot down from the Turks. So this is such a complicated issue, but it's really not. The issue that all of this stuff, ISIS came because we gave them weapons. That's how they got involved in Syria. ISIS is a product of American gun running through Benghazi. We gave them the guns. We gave them the equipment. We provided them money and resources. We gave them all this stuff. The U.S.-backed rebels are there because they're U.S.-backed. We've provided them training and resources and all of this stuff. So we are actively involved in trying to overthrow a government through covert means that aren't very covert. These people, we're basically saying, we're not the ones doing this. It's somebody else, but we're the ones providing them the weapons to do that. If you want to create a stable Middle East, the answer is not to just throw a ton of automatic weapons in a bunch of these jihadist hands. That's not the way you make it stable. And Putin realizes that, but our administration somehow doesn't.
Or maybe it does, and maybe you're exactly right. Maybe it just wants to go and cause a bunch of mini little wars. People call libertarians paranoid and conspiratorial and all that fun stuff, but if you really read 1984, it's almost like tit for tat. Every single thing down the line, just causing little mini wars in other countries so that they cause wars against us so that we can, build up the regime and then, pretty much just have, the kind of, and when you're talking about, surveillance over here and all this other stuff, I'm not even talking about domestic, which we've already covered just today, but the idea of how much crap we're stirring up over there, almost just to, to create a reason for us to go to another major war because, well, we haven't been able to make enough money off this one, or I don't know. I mean, it just seems a little bit.
This is how world wars start, though, is that you start with a regional conflict that creates a power vacuum, and you have to understand balance of power in the world. This in particular, there is a balance of power that we all need to really understand. There are superpowers, and basically we've tried to create a world here where we don't have just these two superpowers where there's a bunch of protectorates of these superpowers, and it's this side versus that side, and there's all this tension built up. And the reason why we haven't had that situation as much is because the Soviet Union fell. So we've in the United States, we've had this hegemonic position where we're the sole superpower, essentially, and we're able to control a lot of the world policy. Well, the issue is we're becoming weakened, and our enemies are getting stronger, and then we're involving ourselves in these never-ending terrorist war on terrorism, and we're creating power vacuums, and it displaces this balance of power. And anytime there's a power vacuum, people will rush to fill it. Interests will rush to fill it. Russia is one of those countries that will take advantage of displaced power, and they'll try to gain more power because they feel, first of all, that they're owed it in some cases, like in Crimea, where it used to be former Soviet Union, and they think that they're just putting the band back together, essentially. But in this case, the situation in Syria, there's so many different people involved in this. This is how world wars start to happen. Is you have all these interests that are getting involved in regional conflicts, and then when bigger powers start to have conflicts with one another, if there are foreign entanglements or alliances, especially the NATO alliance, where one is attacked, all are attacked. This is how you start to draw the line in the sand between this side versus that side, and this is how you can lead to a global war. This is what happened in World War I. A regional conflict got out of hand, and all these foreign powers started picking sides. I fear that we're close to that again.
Yeah, I do agree, and I think it was compared quite a bit to World War I in one of the articles that I read, just because they're like a lot of this just doesn't make sense, but you don't need to make any sense in a world war. That's the whole point is that there's not really just clear lines that are drawn. It's a web that is completely messed up when you're dealing with all of these different interests. And you're right. I mean, things are really scary, especially when it comes to the idea of bringing people over here from the mess that we started. I mean, I keep telling people, they're like, oh gosh, you don't know, there's such a small threat of terrorism for them to come over here. And I'm like, first off, it's a bunch of religious people, and I don't mean to sound bad about it, but I'm not interested in more religious people here. You know what I mean? I'm interested in more logical and reasoning people here, and people who are being displaced from their own country precisely because of us and because of the actions that we've taken over there. Sure, maybe we have an obligation to bring people as far as refugees over when we've created a mess, but when quite a bit of their religious leaders have basically chanted death to America and death to Israel, which is one of our primary allies, I don't see how this isn't a recipe for disaster, just like what you were talking about. I mean, now they're coming over here and they're just being ushered in to basically cause problems. And if 8 people caused a massive problem, not only throughout Europe, but even in the United States, how many people out of the 65,000 that the Obama administration is promising to bring over are going to happen? I mean, all you need is 1%, and now you have calamitous disaster everywhere.
Exactly, and that's a huge issue. The domestic problems that can arise from that, also the anti-Islamic sentiment that can start to grow. Imagine if we are attacked here at home in a Paris-style attack, or another 9/11 happens here. The amount of anti-Islamic sentiment that would grow. I'm concerned about a World War II-style internment camp kind of situation that we did with the Japanese Americans that were here. I'm concerned about us getting to the point where we get so anti-Muslim that we start throwing these people in prison camps, essentially. And look, I need to be clear. Like, I know that all of you out there know that not every Muslim is a terrorist. I know you understand that. However, the ideology that strictly adheres to the interpretations, the literal interpretations of the Hadith and the Quran and Sharia law, is not congruent with our American way of life, with our American values, with our Constitution. So that is what the problem is. The only issue is that how do you tell a good Muslim from a bad Muslim? It's difficult. So opening the floodgates without being able to fully vet them, first of all, because they're being vetted by people who are not used to doing this kind of vetting. Even people at the CIA say that they have a difficult time determining friend from foe in this circumstance. But in addition to that, it takes up to 2 years to conduct these background checks, this vetting process, and we're simply not doing that. And more importantly, let me just ask you, why would we trust our government to protect us from terrorists entering the country when first of all, our government is responsible for creating ISIS, and our government is not serious about attacking ISIS. Again, they have hundreds of targets in Syria that we know about, that we aren't bombing, and the bombs that we are blowing things up in Syria are just a show of force, just to say that we're doing something. Obama's already been sending back 70% of our pilots who have targets of opportunity that will not produce collateral damage, and he's denying them attack those targets in Syria that are ISIS. So we're not serious about destroying ISIS. I think that our government is setting us up to be attacked in order for us to get into Syria hardcore. And I need to tell you guys right now, you will hear a call for us to get boots on the ground in Syria. You're going to hear a call for a safe zone in Syria, a no-fly zone in Syria. Say no. Say no to a war. I need to make it clear. Do not let them trick you into wrapping yourself in the flag and calling for war in Syria. It will lead us to World War III. I can guarantee you that. And they're leaving us open to get another, Patriot Act style sentiment where we just, government, just save us, do whatever you can. But they're going to make us less safe.
Mac, I couldn't agree more, and that's the thing about, when you're dealing with all these nationalists, especially on the right, who are like gung-ho America and, fight, and then you deal with all these socialists on the left, and we remember what National Socialism does to another country over in Europe. The idea behind all of this is so, it almost looks as though it's written. You're dealing with massive amounts of inflation that could ensue because of major debts and war debts that we have racked up, just like Germany did. You're dealing with a situation that if you bring over a bunch of people and they essentially start creating terrorism on our soil with a bunch of guns, their first thing, you have all the people on the left already who are interested in banning guns, and then you get a bunch of people who are not like us, and then you're going to start to see more and more people who are moderates and on the right go, I guess it's just for the better that we go ahead and ban guns. Then you've got a situation where the Second Amendment's thrown out the window due to martial law. You've got massive amounts of hyperinflation due to the debt and due to the fact that we can't tax enough and due to the fact that we're in multiple wars that we can't fund. And now you're looking at a situation where, not just a police state, but you're looking at an entire military. It could be just a collapse of the country, but will I sound a little paranoid to you?
I feel like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat.
Right, doesn't it? Doesn't it seem like that's what's going on?
Honestly, I feel like the more I'm researching this, the more evident it is that this is what they know will happen. And if you're the guy running the country, Mark, I have to ask you, what do you think will happen if you leave the border completely wide open? You've created a terrorist organization overseas that hates your guts. You're not actively bombing the hundreds of targets that we know about, and you're involved in a situation that, like in Syria, that is a lot of parties, a lot of moving parts, a lot of conflict, a lot of opportunity for global war to happen, while you're talking about allowing refugees to come into the country. None of this makes any sense, which is why the more I look at this, the more I realize they're not that stupid. No one could be this stupid. This is a deliberate attempt to weaken America and to get us involved in the Middle East. Again, we already know that Obama wants us in Syria. So this would be...
Well, do you think it's that's a question that I have, because you were blaming Obama based on the Benghazi situation of bringing in weapons to ISIS or arming them, and I happen to believe that it's been the military-industrial complex all along doing this. I don't know if it's Obama. Sure, he's at the helm, but I don't think it necessarily changed when Bush left office and when Obama entered.
Again,
maybe he's less experienced or he has less experienced people around him, but I don't think that this is necessarily one guy that's doing this. I mean, Ron Paul said there's no coincidence that you have the century of central banking and the century of massive wars. It's an absolute, one leads to the other causality, if not major correlation, but he thinks it's causation. I don't know. Am I barking up a completely different tree than what you're talking about?
I agree with what you're saying. I'm not necessarily saying, because I think that Obama and his administration, they just want to weaken American power and take a step back. Now, they may have more nefarious aims, but I do believe that they're in league with people who actually do have nefarious aims that want to drag us into this. And with this situation with Syria, for example, we already know that Obama wants to get involved in Syria. They've wanted to topple these regimes. They want to create instability. For some reason, they think it's good for America, I guess, or at least for their agenda. I can't imagine how destabilizing the Middle East is good for us. And I can't imagine why we would knowingly not bomb the hundreds of ISIS targets that we know about. They're just sitting there. Mark, a question for you here. If you were actually serious, if you were serious about destroying ISIS, what would you do?
I'm really glad that I'm not at the helm right at the moment, but I think when you're talking about the fact that, with the technology we have, and if we do have the capability of taking out ISIS targets, why is it that we're not, considering the fact that Assad portends at least to be against ISIS? Wouldn't you rather not get into a scuffle with Russia? I would rather just take out a line with Assad, just like we should have aligned with Saddam Hussein. We should have never gone in there. Granted, Saddam Hussein was bad, but we put him in there. And the idea that, we built him up to beat up on Iran so that our oil prices would be kept low, and then we built up these regimes that we went ahead and ultimately took out, which then allowed for ISIS to continue to grow and just fester. I think that, the best way of really doing this, it's interesting in War Games, that movie with Matthew Broderick, the computer at the very end after playing tic-tac-toe for global nuclear whatever war, basically said, it's a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. And somehow I feel as though we're so far into this that you can't just back out and not play this move. But it seems to me as though, what else do you do? We should just be out of there entirely, in my opinion, to, get as much of a body count or as many of those targets out that you can, and then get out of there. But it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen to me. I don't know about you.
I don't think it's too late, and I think that's what we're going to hear. I think we're being set up to be attacked right now on the homeland by ISIS, and this administration is either willfully allowing it, or they are dangerously apathetic to the threats that we face right now, and they are going to be responsible when we are attacked. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We will be attacked. They can't stop everything. And again, the Fabian strategy, you focus on at home. You deregulate. You encourage open carry or concealed carry. People be armed. Be on the lookout for ISIS terrorists. You want to stop terrorists. Imagine if the president got on and encouraged people to open carry or at least carry a firearm on their person at any given point of the day. A terrorist attack like what happened in Paris couldn't happen here. But instead, we're pushing for more gun control, and we're not bombing ISIS. And by the way, our president, he actually did not bomb ISIS oil supplies where they're actually producing oil. And this is funding terrorism, by the way. He didn't attack that. Do you know what explanation he said why we haven't taken out those targets yet, Mark?
I didn't hear that. No, why?
Yeah, he didn't want to hurt the environment. It was environmental.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
So, is that the same thing as Bernie Sanders saying the whole reason for terrorism is because of climate change? Oh, God, if they just would grasp at any more straws. It's about as ridiculous as I see, like, these Black Lives Matter rallies down here in Seattle, and then, they're tying it into a $15 minimum wage and more unions and more social. And I'm like, wait a minute, what argument are we fighting here? This isn't about climate change. This is about protecting protecting the people of the United States and our allies. But then again, I digress. So.
well, it seems to me that if I was serious, if I was in charge and I wanted to really, take the fight to ISIS, first of all, I wouldn't put any boots on the ground. It's not my issue. I would not necessarily be aligned with Russia or Assad. But I definitely wouldn't be acting against them, and I would look at Assad as a stabilizing force. It's somebody I don't necessarily like, and I would understand again that, Russia's interest in this region is going to have harmful effects to our interests as far as oil, which is why I would be focusing on getting us off of foreign oil. We need to be independent, energy independent, and build up our GDP to fight the debt problems that we have, yada, yada, yada. We already talked about that. But as far as ISIS, we have hundreds of targets that we know about. I would bomb the hell out of those. I'd bomb anything that had wheels on it in Syria. I would bomb their oil, their infrastructure. I would bomb all of that stuff and then I would not conduct any trade with these people. And I would talk to our allies, our friends, and say, don't trade with them, please. And cut them off from their resources. If they don't have money, if they don't have infrastructure, they need to turn inwards, which is exactly what they want to do to us. They want to attack us here at the homeland and create domestic unrest here. That way, while we're involved in a world war with Russia, fighting each other, weakening ourselves while ISIS grows, they want all of this to happen. All of this is going on at the same time, and then they want domestic uprising. Now, I want you, Mark, you know how big the Black Lives Matter movement is right now, how much domestic unrest is actually being spread just through that movement, in addition to, obviously, some instances, not every instance where police have used force incorrectly or overused force, but there are, like I said, not all of them are like that, but some are. But right now, there's protests that have been going on, highways are being shut down, businesses are being shut down. This movement is growing and growing. So Mark, I want to ask you, do you think that it will get bigger when we're in a global war? If we're in a World War III type scenario, do you think that this movement will grow?
I don't think so. I mean, I think really what would happen is that it would shrink for unity. And it's the same kind of thing as, like, almost in V for Vendetta, where they're talking about unity through strength, or strength through unity, and we all have to be on the same side here. And of course, the same side is dictated by the government and what they say, and that's
So, this is another area that we disagree on, because first of all, I think that there are a lot of anti-capitalists that are a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. I've met several of them. You have the Black Panthers rebooted with inside this, and they want instability. They want chaos, essentially, and you can see this through their protest practices, and again, their calls for violence against other races, especially white people, but the issue here, I think, is the common denominator of their goal that they share with many different interest groups. So I want to relate this here, in fact, to the Muslim Brotherhood plan that I really do think that we need to talk about here. So let me find this article, and I think that it will shed some light on it. But first of all, let's talk about this chaos. Who wants chaos? Obviously, revolutionaries want chaos. People who don't like the capitalist system, people who want to overthrow the government. So you'll have the anarchists that are in every May Day. Being somebody who lives in the Pacific Northwest, Mark, you're probably aware of the May Day protests that take place in Seattle and Portland.
Absolutely.
You can see these interest groups coalesce. You can see the Black Lives Matter movement join forces with, for example, anarchists, communists, socialists. Already, those groups are and statists, by the way, people who are for big government and things like that. They are all part of the May Day protests that take place. So they already have an organization that is somewhat interconnected between these groups of people, and they mobilize. And their purpose is chaos. That's why they shut down the streets. That's why they spout their anti-capitalist agenda and propaganda. And in addition to that, the Muslim Brotherhood, this is a plan that was found back in 2004 when a terrorist organization was raided, and we got a hold of some of this information. This was in their possession. These are documents that were in their possession. They're calling for the Islamicists to join forces with these groups as well to help spread chaos. So I want you to imagine this group, as large as it will be and is currently, as this organization grows. Then I want you to think about for a second here, Mark, the lack of volume that you've been hearing from an anti-war movement. When there's a Republican in the office, there's this huge anti-war agenda that's all the time screaming loud, but because there's a Democrat in office, we don't hear it. Well, if we get involved in Syria, and we have a global war type situation that's going to happen, I don't think solidarity will be something that people will be concerned about in this group, because they're concerned about chaos and the anti-war movement blowing up, getting huge, and joining with these other forces could have some serious effects as far as stability. And if you're listening to me about this, I'm warning you now. If you have an opportunity to get out of a populated area, if you live in a city, you need to be looking elsewhere. You need to have a plan. You need to have some kind of plan to get out of there long term, like moving out of the city. Not just a bug out plan, but a plan to actually get out of the city, because this chaos that is going to be created, it's not going to be something that you're just going to be watching on TV. It's going to be spilling through your windows and your front door. You have to get out of there. So Mark, what do you think? Am I wrong?
I think you're paranoid. I don't think you're wrong, because I would probably be eating my words, and then you could be like, yeah, you guys, I'm right. But I do think it is. I think it's something that is. It's imminent. I mean, it's definitely. I don't know if it's imminent, but it definitely is something that's possible. Especially because when we see all of the different things, I mean, we're an empire that's caving in under our own weight, and I think that that's just a byproduct of what we do militarily. And I think that's what goes on when you look at something domestically, where you're, basically just trying to, provide a program for everybody, drive yourself further and further into debt, and then ultimately make yourself, into a martial law situation that a 1984, a V for Vendetta, I mean, any of that stuff really is, it's kind of what you're speaking to, and I don't think that it's necessarily that far off. I hope you're wrong, I do, and I think you hope you're wrong, but it's the idea that you're probably right, and that's what sucks about it,
This is something, I make these kind of predictions, and I was talking to my wife. My wife hates me talking about this stuff to her. She doesn't want to think about it. She doesn't want to worry about it. So I sit here, freaking out about this kind of stuff to myself, and I'm hoping that I'm wrong. And there's going to come a day. I honestly believe that there's going to come a day when all of these dominoes start to fall, and we see these things happening right now. I mean, the conflict between Turkey and Russia is just one more domino that is falling. And as these start to fall, I think they hit some sort of critical mass where it all starts to happen at once. And I think that we're already in World War III right now. We're at the precipice of this. The economic collapse is underway. It's only a matter of time now. And if the economy crashes, if you have a bunch of disgruntled, unemployed youths, a lot of people who are just pissed off, we go into a global war, and we're defaulting on our loan with China, and our debt is essentially reset to zero in some cases if we're not at war with China. But we lose a global currency if we start fighting Russia. The anti-war movement builds up. The Islamicists, anarchists, communists, socialists, Black Lives Matter, they all team up to create domestic unrest here in the country. I see a lot of problems happening here all at once, and it's very concerning. And then you add the additional layer of the threat to terrorism that we're stirring up in the Middle East and leaving ourselves vulnerable here at home, which could drag us further into global war. I believe that we are going to be hit here in America. Our government is going to try to get us to get involved, boots on the ground, in another patriotic surge overseas, essentially, and we need to say no to it. Getting involved, boots on the ground in Syria is a bad idea, and we need to, first of all, if we're going to attack ISIS, we have an easy way to do that through the air. We have targets that we know about. We can bomb their infrastructure, weaken them that way, strengthen us by not getting involved and letting Russia take care of that, get our own oil situation taken care of, and not actually fall right into the hand of the Muslim Brotherhood plan, which, by the way, is right here. Phase 1, phase of a discreet and secret establishment of leadership. Phase 2, a phase of gradual appearance on the public scene and exercise exercising and utilizing various public activities. Phase 3, escalation phase, prior to the conflict and confrontation with rulers through utilizing mass media. This is the phase that they're currently in progress here. Phase 4, open public confrontation with government through exercising political pressure approach. And this is what I'm talking about through the subversion with domestic uprising. The Islamicists are joining these domestic uprising groups. Phase 5, seizing power to establish their Islamic nation under which all parties and Islamic groups are united. So they're going to accomplish this by several ways here. They want to expand the Muslim presence by birth rate and immigration and refusal to assimilate, which is a problem that we're seeing in places like Dearborn, Michigan, and in Europe, for example. They're going to occupy and expand domination of physical spaces, ensuring the Muslim community knows and follows the Muslim Brotherhood doctrine, controlling the language we use, and describing our enemy. For example, we're not saying radical Islam. We're not calling the enemy what it is. They don't want us to ensure, this is another one, ensuring that we do not study their doctrine, Sharia, which is the problem. They want to co-opt our key leadership. They want to force compliance with Sharia law at local levels, fighting all counterterrorism efforts, subverting religious organizations, employing lawfare, which is the offensive use of lawsuits and threats with lawsuits. They want to claim victimization and demanding accommodation. So they got more. I want to get back to these 2 points here, the victimization and lawfare, in a moment. They want to condemn slander against Islam, subverting the U.S. education system in particular, infiltrating and dominating U.S. Middle East studies programs, which they've already done, demanding the right to practice Sharia in segregated Muslim enclaves, which they're doing now, demanding recognition of Sharia law in non-Muslim spheres. They're working on that as well. Confronting and denouncing Western society laws and traditions. They've been doing that from the get-go. And the last one, demanding that Sharia replace Western law. And they're talking about that as well. So,
Mac, that's such an interesting point, and this is the one that I got to end on because I do have to jump off. But the idea that people think, that will never happen here. Dearborn, Michigan was the very first city in the United States to adopt Sharia law. It's already happened. So when people think, that's not going to happen, when you can start to see how people, especially the left in this country, will attack Christians, will attack Catholics, will attack any other religion unless one that has been quote-unquote oppressed. And when the most violent and the one that most people just turn their heads around and say, I don't really care that bad things are happening or they're adopting Sharia law, that's the one that's actually happening. And that's the one that people are basically calling you out. Like when you had said, victimization. It's basically racist to say anything bad about Muslims. I mean, you can hear this from very, very well-spoken, very articulate, very intelligent and educated liberal people who really just don't get that that's an intention behind this, is that, if you make these people victims, then you can't attack them. And the more that they can grow and develop, majorities in smaller towns, they take over smaller towns, they take over on a local level. And the way that you can beat all of this stuff is because politics is local. That's how you can do it. So anyway, that's the last thing I can say, but I love talking on your show, Mac. I appreciate the opportunity, and keep fighting the good fight, because this is really entertaining, and it's also pretty damn scary, if you ask me.
Well, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it. We love having you on the show. So thanks for joining us, man. And for everyone else, we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about our featured topics. We're going to move into the ISIS plan to spread the Caliphate worldwide, Russia's interest versus Obama's. Actually, we've already kind of talked about that. I want to give you the guys the argument against global government, why self-interest is a good thing, power vacuums, a balance of power. We've talked about that, statist power grab, domestic unrest. We pretty much covered these topics. I want to talk when we come back here specifically about this plan and the employing lawfare, claiming victimization aspects of it. I have some articles that I want to get to on this regard. And anyway, we'll be right back after these messages. Don't go anywhere.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. We're in the third hour now. I appreciate you guys sticking with us. For those of you who aren't aware, here's a new article on the KurdishDailyNews.org. This is dated November 27, 2015. U.S. Special Forces in Kobane to back the Kurdish forces in the fight against ISIS. So apparently we are sending people in to actually train the Kurds, potentially arm the Kurds. We have the first group of instructors who are going to arrive that will be training the Kurds. I think this is good. This is a good thing that we're actually training and arming the Kurds. I hope that we get more serious about this. If anybody in the region of Syria is U.S. friendly, it's the Kurds. They actually like us over there. For some reason, they like us. We've been doing everything in our power to make them hate us, but they still like us. So, anyway, let's see here. We got some other stuff that we want to get to. Okay, so I said I was going to talk about the victimization and the lawfare approach, where they're basically conducting a war through lawsuits. They're trying to make us not allowed to, first of all, talk about them, not allowed to identify them, and claiming the victim throughout the process. And all we really have to do is look at two cases that I have here from recent news articles here. The first one is Clockboy, and I want to talk about this article here. We got, let's see, this is Breitbart.com. Clockboy exploiting war on terror, punishing Texas school district with a $15 million shakedown. This article is written by Tony Lee. On Tuesday, Breitbart News Daily, Pamela Geller accused Clockboy Ahmad Mohammed and his family of exploiting the war on terror that Muslim radicals are waging against the Westerners by suing Irving, Texas, and the local school district for $15 million. Now, let's just point out, first of all, this boy, he's claimed that he built a clock. That's what his title, Clock Boy. He built a clock. Well, the clock, first of all, he didn't build. He just got it from parts from a clock that he took apart. And it wasn't really a clock because it only counted backwards, and it didn't look like a clock. In fact, it was in a briefcase where there was wires all over the place, and again, it only counted down. So it's not really a clock. It's more of a timer. It's a briefcase timer. And he wonders why people got concerned about him having this, especially when it wasn't a science fair. It's not a project. He just brought it to school, and he was showing people, hey, look at this thing that I built. Kind of looks like a bomb. All right? And again, I don't necessarily think it should be illegal for him to have this. I'm not saying there should be laws against it. I'm just saying that, he should understand that maybe the school doesn't want... We're not allowed to have guns in school. We're not even allowed to have Pop-Tarts that are in the shape of guns in school. We have a zero-tolerance policy, it seems like, all over the country, where people get sent home, get suspended, zero tolerance, all right? And he's suing for $15 for bringing what looks like a bomb to anyone with eyes into a school. $15 million. All right, this is just one example. And then we got another one here where CARE, that is it's an Islamic group, it's a Muslim activist group, who went after a Florida firearms retailer who posted a Muslim-free zone sign. And a federal discrimination lawsuit filed by the Muslim activist groups against the Florida firearms retailer who posted the Muslim-free zone sign has been dismissed. U.S. District Judge Beth Bloom ruled that Florida gun supply owner and Andy Hallinan's statement was protected by the First Amendment and that the activist couldn't show that they were injured. So I don't think that this is going to go away. They have 30 days to appeal the ruling. But anyway, this is an interesting topic that I wanted to actually talk to you guys about and find out what your take on this is. We had a post on our Facebook page. Let me see if we have any activity on that. Nope, doesn't look like we do. No worries. I'll give you my take on it. So, first of all, as far as having a Muslim-free zone, I think that a Muslim-free zone is probably not a good idea. I'm not interested in trying to segregate us and making us like trying to select out one ethnic or religious group. Again, I think there's a difference between a good Muslim and a bad Muslim, and the difference is the literal interpretation of the Hadith and the Quran and the belief in Sharia law. I think Sharia law is abhorrent, and I have a major issue with that. It discriminates. First of all, the mere fact of women. Again, we're talking 50% of the population have no rights in Sharia law, no rights whatsoever. They're more property than anything. So. No rights whatsoever. That's a concern for me. So, again, I think that the difference between a Muslim that we can peacefully coexist with and a Muslim who we can't is Sharia law. So, I digress. The point is that I think that you as a business owner should be able to deny service to anyone for any reason. I have no issue with that. Now, I may judge you for that. I may decide not to do business with you because you discriminate against a certain race or religion or whatever. Whatever you do may offend me, and I may choose not to do my business there. But I don't think that the government should come in and say, no, you're not allowed to do this. And I agree, this business owner has the right of free speech to post whatever signs that he wants on his property. And again, there's not anyone that is actually claiming that has been injured during this sign for the sign being posted. I'm sure he's not standing there and saying, "Are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Muslim?" on every single person that comes through and denying people service. Now, maybe he is, and if he is, I think that he has a right to do that. I think it's a mistake. But I think he has a right. My concern is the sentiment that will grow around this. Again, I'm concerned about World War II style internment camps. And I can see that that sentiment, that anti-Islamic sentiment starting to grow after we're attacked, after we're allowed to be attacked by this administration in order to get us involved in another global war, to get involved in Syria, boots on the ground. I think that is the goal. I think that they're allowing this to happen, this threat to take place, in order for another 9/11 style attack to rally people up and want to get payback. Don't fall victim. Do not fall victim to this. All right? We don't have to go to war. We do not say no to it. Don't fall for the trick. All right? They're leaving us wide open. Why would you trust the government to take out ISIS? Why? They created ISIS. They're not serious about destroying ISIS. They know hundreds of targets are out there that they could bomb. They're choosing not to bomb them. It doesn't make sense. Something is off here. It does not pass a smell test. So why would you, even if you don't believe that there's a global shadow government kind of thing going on, which I have a hard time believing myself, I don't know. I just know things aren't right. I know things are not what they seem. I don't trust the government because they've given me every indication not to trust them, that they're not serious about this. So to give them more power, I mean, I want you to imagine the state of our country after another 9/11 attack here. We already have the National Defense Authorization Act. We already have the Patriot Act. It's going to get a lot worse here. And the anti-Muslim sentiment will grow, especially if we have thousands of Syrian refugees that are coming in. I'm concerned about the heart of our country, the soul of our country. We're going to sacrifice all of our values in order to get security. And again, as Benjamin Franklin said, those who will sacrifice liberty to gain security will get neither, and they'll deserve both. Or I'm sorry, they don't deserve either, and they'll lose both. Man, I messed that up. Anyway, you get the idea. You get the gist of it. So this is just another example of how Muslims are using lawfare to actually, claim victimization and demanding accommodations. They're condemning slander against Islam, and again, you can't even talk about the Prophet Muhammad without putting your life at risk. They want us to be ignorant about their ideology because their ideology is completely against us and liberty. So anyway, let's see. We got a few other topics we can get to here. I want to talk in particular here, the argument against global government and just why this is a bad thing. And I don't know why I have to have this conversation. I mean, I know why. I thought I would never have to actually make the argument against global government. I thought that, this is just a conspiracy theory. There's nobody actively trying to pursue global governance. That's what I thought. And maybe that's true, but I do believe that if we see economic collapse, domestic unrest here in America, a fall from power of the United States, and a complete displacement of that power, creating power vacuums around the world, and now other countries are competing in their own national interest to fill this void. World War III. The domestic unrest that will come from that, terrorism here in America, all of this stuff coalescing into a giant conflict with World War III. If nuclear weapons are used, even if they're not, even if there's a big global war, I think one thing that could possibly happen would be, us to be flung into a war against Russia, and that's exactly what ISIS would want. ISIS would want us to fight each other, to weaken ourselves, because ISIS can't beat us alone. ISIS is weak. ISIS cannot defeat us. Just America alone, let alone Russia and America teaming up. They just cannot do it. But what they can do is get us involved in costly wars, and make us lose the way that the Soviet Union fell. Osama bin Laden took a lot of credit for that, by the way, with the Afghanistan war that the Soviet Union was involved in. He claimed that he's the one that toppled the regime. So, Osama bin Laden thought that he was the one that destroyed the Soviet Union, and he has some credit that should be given to him for that as well, because of his involvement in this quagmire known as the Middle East. They call Afghanistan the graveyard for empires. And they call it that for a reason, because this area, this is an ungoverned region that will not submit. And the reason it won't submit is this ideology that puts their religion above the state as far as power. Sharia law is the ultimate law, and they're going to resist anything that comes in there. And you're going to be involved in this long guerrilla war that will never end. Just like if somebody tried to attack us here at the homeland in America. You're never going to win that war. It's going to be a never-ending guerrilla war. So, as far as why we need to protect ourselves, I think in particular, ISIS is trying to get us involved with a war with Russia. I think there's a potential that Turkey could be aligning themselves with ISIS. They're both Sunnis. Now, I'm not saying that all Turkish people are, for ISIS. I don't know. But what I will say is that if you're a good Muslim, okay, if you're a Muslim that we can live peacefully behind, I would need to hear two things from them, I think. First of all, to condemn ISIS as a terrorist organization, and then to condemn Sharia law. If I don't hear those two things, and that is you remaining silent on the issue, and I'm going to have some questions. I'm going to have some questions about your sincerity of our friendship here. And, that may make me want to pull back from that relationship. And I think that, honestly, I'm not saying that Turkey is an enemy by any means. I'm not saying that. But I do think that we need to pull back our relationship with them. Because, first of all, they made a stupid mistake. They shot down that Russian jet. And then the U.S.-backed rebels, to add insult to injury, shot the pilot that was coming down while he was in a parachute, and that's against the Geneva Convention. In addition, the U.S.-backed rebels used a tow missile provided by the United States to shoot down one of the helicopters that came to rescue the pilots. So, it's not a good situation. Not a good situation we got ourselves involved in. So, anyway, as far as why a global government is a bad thing, because I think that this is going to be, after all this is said and done, after we fight it out with Russia, if that happens, I hope it doesn't. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about all of this. But if we end up in a global conflict where we weaken each other and ISIS takes control and starts to spread the Caliphate, I believe that we'll have to make a decision to where we put our differences aside with who we're currently fighting and focus on the real threat, which is ISIS. The real threat of radical Islam. By then it could be too late if we don't notice in time, if we don't do something about it in time. But after all this is said and done, and we have relative stability again, I can guarantee you that people are going to be discussing global government, and they're going to be talking about, we need to put a governance in place that has control and sovereignty over all the other nations. That way, that we can make sure this never happens again. A global authority to prevent global war again, and this is something that is a bad idea. First of all, when you centralize power, when you put it in fewer hands, it's easier to take over. And the George Soroses and his ilk are able to take advantage of this power structure that's set up. And again, just like the federal government, our federal government was supposed to have such a tiny little footprint. It was supposed to have, very little impact on your life. Most of what you were going to see as far as government was going to be local and state government, and the federal government was really not supposed to be involved in that much. However, as you see, governments grow, and when you have an authority, a government that has sovereignty or authority over another government, even if they're restricted and regulated somehow and protected, like a Bill of Rights, it says all the rights not granted to the federal government in this document are reserved to the states respectively and the people, it still doesn't work out. They'll find ways to reinterpret the language and find a way around it. So a global government that's only responsible for a very limited and handful of responsibilities will grow. Sovereignty of nations will be affected from that. Obviously, this global government will start to tell these countries, these sovereign nations, what to do and act in a way outside its authority. So the answer is not more government. Again, this is the statist answer. Is, we have a problem, let's try to control it, let's try to manipulate it. That's what they do with the Fed. Let's try to prop up the free market, and if there's a problem in the market, if there's some kind of issue, we need to try to make an adjustment and fix it ourselves. And all they end up doing is, first of all, delaying the inevitable problem that we're going to have to face, and second of all, making the problem worse when we do have to face it. That's what they're doing with the debt. That's what they're doing with the artificial stimulating of the stock market, pumping billions and billions and billions of dollars into the stock market to artificially prop it up. And they're making this problem, this storm that we could have already weathered the storm. They're making it worse, and making it something that we may not be able to weather as a country. The country may not look the same. I want you to think about this. If the government collapses under its own weight, if all these social programs, by the way, the domestic uprising stuff that I was talking about, domestic unrest, with all the different groups I was talking about, an anti-war movement, Black Lives Matter, socialists, communists, anarchists, Islamists, all of them working together to create chaos. I want you to imagine what will happen if during this period of time the economy collapses because we're in a global war and Russia instead is winning the Cold War style tactic of having to spend ourselves into oblivion, and we do, our economy collapses. Food stamps stop coming in the mail. EBT, funds not available. Welfare checks not coming. You got all these people who are out of work, all of these people who aren't getting their government checks, and they're going to be angry. And by the way, that's one of the first steps that you'll see is these services that are provided like EBT. If you start seeing them not providing them, you need to get your money out of the bank, and you need to do it quickly. And you probably need to get out of town as quickly as possible. Or if you're in a position where you can hole up, because things are about to get bad. These are all the different scenarios. And again, I don't have a crystal ball. I just know what a potential outcome of this could be. And there's millions of different potential outcomes. I hope cooler heads prevail. And I hope that we get the government out of our way so we can fix our economic problems. And I hope that we stay out of Syria. But I don't think that's going to happen. I see the elites, the powerful, lining us up in order to fill an agenda that they have in order to accomplish certain goals. And again, I think they may have different goals amongst themselves, but I think one of those goals is global war. And I think they're going to try to do that through Syria. And I think they're going to try to get into Syria by allowing an act of terrorism to happen on U.S. soil that will get us all patriotic again, wrap ourselves in the flag and say, yeah, we're going to go kick some butt in Syria. And all that's going to do is drive us further into this regional conflict, which we need to get out of. And the only reason why we're there and we care about is because of oil. It's really that simple. When you break it down like that, it's really that simple. But if we get involved in a global war, we're going to spend ourselves into oblivion. We're going to create an economic collapse. It's going to create more and more unrest. I'm just really concerned about this. And as I said, Mark, he doesn't agree with me as far as the likelihood of this happening, but I think that there's a pretty good chance that I'm right. And I've never wanted to be wrong so much in my life. I just want to be left the hell alone. I just want to enjoy the freedoms, what little freedoms I have left. I'd like to expand upon them. And by the way, I'm not acting as if all is lost. I'm not, first of all, I know there's going to be a lot of suffering that we're going to have to endure if this stuff does happen. But I believe that, the people who are the producers will survive. The people that find a way to produce will survive. And I want you to look at this kind of like The Walking Dead. In The Walking Dead, they have this mentality where the world has changed. It's not the softer side that you're used to. People will take what's yours if they think they can. And self-interest is a great thing. If you're talking about self-interest, it's my self-interest to have as many resources as possible. So, if I have the ability, as a bad actor or an amoral actor, to take something that belongs to you and you can't fight me to protect your resources, then it behooves me to do that. That's a self-interest. But additionally, if you have the ability to defend yourself, it is within my self-interest to avoid that conflict. Self-interest is a good thing, and if you look at it on the global scale, nation versus nations, Putin, he's working in his own self-interest. We should work in our own self-interest, and we can find areas where our common self-interest meets, and it's within Russia's self-interest to not get involved in a war. It's in everybody's self-interest to not get involved in a war, which is why we can see something's not right here. The Obama administration is actively acting against what we would consider to be clear self-interests of the United States. So, I believe that the people who survive whatever is to come will be the people who are the producers. And probably not all of the producers will even survive there. I mean, it'll be the lucky ones. It'll be the ones that took precautions already, that had a little bit of luck as well. But the people that are not changing, like in The Walking Dead, the people who refuse to change. In The Walking Dead, you either change to, you decide that you're going to fight to survive, fight to protect what's yours, or you're going to die. Those are your options. You either fight or die. And that's the world. That's the world we live in. We've created this fairy tale that, the world is a civilized place and we have civilized society and slavery, for example, is gone. It's never coming back. Slavery still is here. First of all, it never left. There's been sex trafficking, human slavery. All this stuff has been continuing to go on. It's just we don't talk about it because It's not civilized to discuss. And ISIS is bringing it back with their caliphate. They're enslaving people all over again. So, this has not changed. The world has not changed. What there is there's people who are afraid of self-interest, and they create governments to protect everyone from self-interested parties, self-interested groups. But they don't understand that the governments and the people running the governments have their own self-interest as well. And if you create a power structure that has the ultimate authority, the ultimate power to do everything, to have every influence of your life, there's going to be self-interested parties that want to use that power to their own advantage. Which is why a global government is a bad idea. Which is why self-interest is a good thing, because it's a check and balance. My self-interest to protect myself is a check and a balance against someone else's self-interest to take my things, to do harm to me. So they don't want to be harmed by me. I don't want to be harmed by them. It's peace through strength. That's what Russia believes in. That's what Reagan was talking about, peace through strength. We have to project strength. But we don't need to get involved in stupid battles. We got to be wary of foreign entanglements. And it doesn't mean that we can't have allies. It means that we just need to make sure that the allies that we have are quality allies, real friends of America. We need to not be willing to go to bat and go to war for people that don't like us. We need to stop providing foreign aid to people who hate our freaking guts. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to finish up. We got a few other topics that we want to get to, so you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/onthemoveshow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. So I want to finish up here, wrap this up with one last topic here. And this is in particular, this is relating to statism and the growth of the federal government. Again, the best way that you can encourage the economy to grow, the GDP that the left likes to look at, the national income, national wealth that we're producing every year, the best way that you can do that is to get out of the way of whatever is going on. You don't want to create an impingement or an infringement to stifle this kind of development, innovation, creation, job creation, that kind of stuff. If you make it harder to create wealth, you will get less wealth. I mean, that's just a simple fact that we can all understand. So the left, they are coming so hard at Uber and these other independent contractor services. The sharing economy essentially is what it's referred to, and they don't like the fact that these people are classified as independent contractors because it skirts their ability to get benefits such as like Social Security, health care, things along those lines. That they don't get the same kind of protections, so to speak, that normal employees who are working for a boss have found. And I made a post here. This is on our Facebook group. That's facebook.com/groups/OnTheMoveShow. And I said the statists are coming after you uber hard. They hate that they found a way around the government using technology. Now they're talking about income insurance. Who's going to pay for all this? They do know that money doesn't grow on trees, right? For every dollar they give, they have to steal it first. Redistribution of wealth is state-sanctioned theft. So I'm going to play this video. If you are a part of MoveOn.org, which I subscribe to their emails simply so I can get this kind of information myself, so I can find out what they're talking about, what they're working on now. This is a video that I was sent in an email. And again, they're talking about trying to turn these into these independent contractors into positions where the employers are going to be forced to give them all these benefits and whatnot, unemployment insurance and all that stuff. But again, these people are willingly doing this. These people are deciding to work as independent contractors, that they're making a voluntary decision to enter this line of work. And this probably wouldn't even be a problem. People probably wouldn't be looking at this so much if the government wasn't making it so difficult to make a living in other ways. So anyway, I'm going to play the video. I want you to hear the other side of this coin here.
I'm in an Uber, part of the explosion in the so-called sharing economy. This very group includes independent contractors, free agents, temporary workers, the self-employed. Most file 1099s rather than W-2s for tax purposes. It's estimated that in 5 years, over 40% of the American labor force will be in such uncertain work.
Okay, so first of all, they don't provide a source for that in the video. They just say it's estimated that in 5 years, over 40% will be in this work. So where'd that come from? We don't know. But let's just assume that at face value, it's correct. Why? Why would so many people be looking for uncertain work that doesn't come with these kind of benefits? Well, the answer is clear. You have incentivized them to go to this kind of work because you've made it so difficult for people to have normal jobs. You've made it impossible for people to have the kind of work that we used to all think we would all get is, you'd work for a company, you'd work for them, until you retired, and then you would get a pension. That was a way you did it. That's just not the way it is now. It's not the way it's going to be. And that's why people are looking at getting employment in these independent contractor positions, such as Uber.
In a decade, most of us. This shifts all the risks onto workers. A downturn in demand or sudden change in consumer needs, or a personal injury or sickness can make it impossible to pay the bills.
Okay, so his argument here is that you're not getting insurance, there's no workers' compensation, there's none of that protection that we have for all these other positions. Well, again, independent contractor position is already a classification that we've had. So we've had this carve out for a while, but we've now found a way to use technology to get around the government using this. But again, people are choosing to make this decision. It's not, no one's coercing them into taking this job that's putting all this risk on themselves as far as, if they get injured or something like that. If they got injured on the job, I don't actually know what they could do as far as like if they got injured actually working for Uber. I'm sure there's some kind of protection for independent contractors who get harmed doing that kind of work or actually working for their employer. I'm positive of that. I'll have to look that up later and get back to you guys on that. But as far as what he's talking about is if you got injured off the job and you're not able to work now because you've got an injury. Well, again, it's better for you to have a job than to not have a job. You would agree, right? So his argument is that we should make it harder for these people to employ you, and therefore, as a result, there will be less jobs. That is a fact. If you make it harder to employ people, you put the government in the way, you make it more costly, then this is not quite the advantage that it was. And again, you're attacking jobs. Now, maybe there's not as much benefits as it, but it's still money that you are earning is better than no money that you're earning. So anyway, the video goes on.
It eliminates labor protections such as the minimum wage, worker safety, family and medical leave, and overtime. And it ends employer-financed insurance, Social Security, workers' compensation, unemployment benefits, and employer-provided health insurance under the Affordable Care Act.
Okay, so the Affordable Care Act has been killing jobs, which is the result of us actually having to move to this kind of work because we can't get full-time employment. And we now have to take a part-time job instead of a full-time job. And this idea of having a sharing economy job where you have Uber, you can work whatever hours you want, that's a lot more flexible and allows you as a person who already has a part-time job, or maybe you have 2 part-time jobs, but still not enough to pay for all your bills, not enough to pay for your health insurance, because now you have to pay for your health insurance out of pocket because you're not a full-time employee. You have 2 part-time jobs, you're not a full-time employee, so now you have to figure out a way to earn more money. Well, a flexible job like an Uber driver, that will give you that flexibility to make more money. So now, I mean, you could potentially have to be having 3 jobs to have the kind of income you had before Obamacare, first of all. And as far as Social Security, it's a joke. That is a joke. It will become insolvent. And the money that you... First of all, there is no money in Social Security. It's a bunch of IOUs. It's a big pile of IOUs. They've already spent your money. The government stole from you. What Social Security is doing now is stealing from other people who are currently working. I mean, that's a fact. I'm sorry if you're receiving Social Security. I'm not judging you. I'm just telling you how it is. Social Security is currently stealing from people who are working now to pay you the money that you paid them and they stole from you and never gave you back and never will. And now because more people are going to be retiring than are actually working and paying what the liabilities on this program, it will become insolvent. I'll never see Social Security, and nobody in my generation is going to actually see Social Security. So it's a joke. It is a joke. And again, the minimum wage is a joke too because it kills jobs. If you weren't willing to work for that amount of money, whatever the employer is offering you, then you wouldn't work for it. It's that simple. If you had better options out there, then you would take those options. But in this case, they're saying you should not be allowed to work for whatever you're willing to work for, even if there's no other options that are better. They should force this employer to pay you more, which will result in less jobs that they're being able to offer, which means you could potentially not even have a job. So it's in their minds, it's better for you to be unemployed than to be getting paid less than what they say you have to be getting paid.
No wonder, according to polls, almost a quarter of American workers worry they won't have enough to live on in the future.
Well, it certainly doesn't help that the government is constantly in our pockets. They're taking in more tax revenue than they ever have received in the history of America. So yeah, of course, a quarter of American workers worry that we won't be earning enough money because cost of living is raising all over the country thanks to minimum wage and other progressive type programs. And it's difficult to keep your head above water. It's hard to be a millennial nowadays. Most of us are living in our parents' basements.
That's up from 15% a decade ago.
Oh, a decade ago. Well, a decade ago, let's see, we've had a lot of that period of time. We had Obama in office. We've had this climate change agenda that has been getting pushed, and it's been making it harder and harder for us to have a sustainable economy to encourage growth. We're attacking and regulating every aspect of production. And again, when you regulate something, you get less of it. When you make it harder to produce something, you'll get less of whatever that is. And in this case, it's jobs. You're making it harder to produce jobs as an employer, so we're going to have less of them. So, of course, a fourth of our populations are worried about making money, which is why we're doing things like Uber to make more money, because it's hard to get a job out there.
Such uncertainty can be hard on families, too. Children of parents working unpredictable schedules or outside standard daytime working hours are likely to have lower cognitive skills and more behavioral problems, according to new research.
OMG. this is the excuse here that they're saying. Okay, oh well, because you have unpredictable schedules. Your kids are being affected. They're going to have lower cognitive skills and behavioral problems. So we got to have the government step in and regulate how your schedule is and have it more predictable and all of this. And these people are taking this job because they want to have flexibility in their schedule. They're trying to tell you that you're not smart enough to make your own decisions for you and your family, and the government needs to come in and regulate and tell you how you can work, when you can work, have a better schedule. You can't decide to work for less than what the government says. Again, you're too stupid. You're too dumb to make these decisions for your own, and because it's also affecting the children, do it for the children. Oh my God, the government has to step in. This is their excuse. It's unbelievable.
So what to do? Courts are now overflowing with lawsuits over whether companies have misclassified employees as independent contractors.
And again, there is no misclassification here. But, I don't doubt that the statists will continue to push this, and they probably will win in the end. And this will all be, because again, this is all about growth of government, and growth of special interests. And the people that are going to end up losing in this are the American people. We're not going to be able to find jobs. I mean, that's it. We're going to become more dependent on a government that can't protect us, won't protect us, and can't even provide for us. It's impossible. You're giving all this faith to the government who doesn't care. To them, you are cattle to be herded and to produce revenue for them. They don't care. And the idea that that they're going to change the classification of independent contractor. First of all, this is already something that we've been doing for years and years and years. All right, and secondly, all of the other things, all these protections that we're talking about that this supposedly skirts around, are bullcrap. They hurt the economy. We need to repeal those anyway. But I digress. I mean, I guess that's an ideological take on it that makes logical sense. But, the left, they don't want to do that. Instead, they want us to continue spinning ourselves into oblivion and pushing towards further and further towards economic collapse. They want the state to continue to take on more liabilities and have more of an influence in your life and make it harder for you to have a job. That way you are more reliant on the government to provide for you and take care of you,
resulting in a profusion of criteria and definitions. We should aim instead for simplicity. Whoever pays more than half of somebody's income or provides more than half their working hours should be responsible for all the labor protections and insurance an employee is entitled to.
How about allowing the employee to make a decision what they're willing to work for, and the employer to make a decision of what they're willing to pay for? Again, the answer is not to force people to pay more or to receive more. The answer is to encourage competition in the free market. And how you do that is you get a skill. You become marketable. You get something that everyone else around you doesn't have, whether or not that's a skill that's in high demand or something else. I mean, maybe some education, experience, something along those lines. Have a bargaining chip when you're sitting at the table. Again, if you're in the machinist industry, if you're a machinist, if you are a nurse, something along those lines, you can actually pretty much decide your salary because they're in high demand. So you won't be receiving the minimum wage. You'll be choosing what wage you're willing to work for, and your employer will be deciding, well, what can I pay this person? As opposed to having the government be your negotiator in chief. I mean, this is exactly the opposite of freedom. You're not even allowed to determine what you're willing to work for. You have a right to contract, and the government is violating that right.
In addition, to restore some certainty to people's lives, we need to move away from unemployment insurance and toward income insurance.
What? Okay, so first of all, unemployment insurance is one thing. All right, we already have that. What they're talking about now is to increase the burden. Where does this money come from? Money doesn't grow on trees, as I said. This money has to come from somewhere, and you're going to hear the left continuously say, oh, we're going to tax the 1%, 1%. Even if we tax 100% of the 1%, it can't cover all of the programs that they're talking about. The free college, the income insurance, it can't cover it. It will have to extend into the middle class. Everyone will be paying more. And again, I've mentioned to you already this episode, there's a concept known as the Laffer curve, that as you begin to start taxing people at higher rates, it becomes harder and harder to get more money. After a while, after a certain percentage, you actually earn less tax revenue if you've increased it past whatever percentage that is, you know. So the Laffer curve, it's a real thing. Look it up, Laffer, Laffer curve, all right? And this tax burden, these entitlement programs, these are all things that the government has no authority to be getting involved in. There's no income insurance mentioned in the Constitution, and I happen to know that the federal government only has the authority that the Constitution grants them. Although I'm sure that they're going to say, "Oh, well, the General Welfare Clause says that, you know, we can do this." No, it doesn't. The General Welfare Clause does not mean that you can, you know, generally provide welfare to everyone all the time. Everyone should generally just have welfare available. No, that's not what it means. General welfare means that what the federal government does should be generally beneficial to everyone. All right? So what I mean by that, like a hospital, that would be generally beneficial to everyone. Whether or not you use the hospital, the option to be able to go to the hospital if you have an emergency is there. And that's generally beneficial to you. Them building a road is generally beneficial to you. Now, granted, I don't think that they should do that. I think you should leave it to the free market. But still, it's there. You could choose to use the road if you want. But to create interest groups or to have somebody paying a bill for somebody else, that's not generally beneficial to everyone. That's selecting winners and losers. That's using the government to redistribute wealth, which is, again, that is state-sanctioned theft.
Say, for example, your monthly income dips more than 50% below the average monthly income you've received from all the jobs you've taken over the preceding 5 years. With income insurance, you'd automatically receive half the difference for up to a year. You see, it's possible to have a flexible economy and also provide workers some minimal level of decency and security.
No, it's not. You can't. You just can't. You can't. All right, who's going to pay? Are you going to say that people are going to fund that themselves? All right, well, first of all, we saw what happened with Social Security. They stole that money. So are we supposed to trust you that money is going to be there when it's time for us to grab it, and it's not going to be just spent in other areas of the government, and then they're going to be redistributing wealth and having to increase taxes in order to fund this income insurance program? Of course, that's what's going to happen. And secondly, there's going to be people who aren't going to fully fund it. That you're going to be, no matter what you do, you're going to be taking money from someone else. Because we're not going to be fully funding. It's not like it's going to be a savings plan that you can just take out your money at any given point. And even if it was, even if they were taxing you a certain percentage of your money, and they weren't spending it all, it's just going into the saving plan that is incurring interest, like Social Security was supposed to be, and you're supposed to get your money back plus the interest on it. That was a general idea, but that's not how it worked out. Even if that's the case, all right, people are going to be receiving this who haven't fully funded the amount of money that they're getting. So that means that somebody else is going to take money out of somebody else's pocket. And let's just point out the fact that if the government wasn't taking this money and they were leaving it in your pocket, you could choose to use it however you wanted. And I would argue that you should probably be the one to decide how this money is used, considering that it's yours. The government, again, they think that you're too stupid to decide how you want to use your own money. I mean, that's what the left is trying to do here. They're trying to say, well, you're too dumb to decide and be responsible for your own welfare. So we're going to take out a little bit of money and make sure that you're taken care of in case you ever start getting less money than usual. And that'll last for up to a year. Look, this is taking personal responsibility out of the hands of the people and empowering the government, whereas I believe that we should be empowering the people. Let the free market go. unregulate everything. Deregulate as much as you can safely. And again, I'm not the kind of guy that wants us to just pour toxic waste inside our water, our rivers, streams, lakes. I'm not calling for that. What I'm saying is some of these restrictions are ridiculous. I mean, some of these restrictions are simply the creation of a byproduct of big government working with big business to stamp out the competition, the small businesses. I think the biggest way that we solve that problem is to simplify the tax code. The best way that you can do that is either a flat tax, which I think is the one that will be more likely to actually get passed. A flat tax, everybody pays the same amount no matter what. That will get rid of a lot of these loopholes. I personally like a consumption tax, a use tax, but the only problem is I wouldn't support that unless we got rid of and made illegal through constitutional amendment an income tax, which would be the ideal situation I would support. I just think it's going to be harder to do because who knows if they'll be able to figure out a way to bring it back. I mean, the Second Amendment is clear as day, but yet they still continue to infringe upon the Second Amendment. But I digress. Anyway, so I just want you guys to hear the other side of the argument here. And let me read some of the comments here that were on this post. John on Facebook says, "Vomit. How about folks depend on their own skills/intelligence and willingness of risk? I've had 1099 employees that are perfectly happy having to work at their whims, schedules, etc. And it works well for me being able to use their skills. It's a win-win. But the state/feds can't have that. I'm to dictate to those same contractors that they have to work for others, or I can't have them come work for me, even on their schedules. Many of these people have exceptional skills and love to take advantage of those skills by making all the money in a short period of time working for me. But no, the state can't have that. If we pay our taxes, and we do, why should it bother anyone?" Anyway, Lou goes on to say, this administration is leaving no stone unturned. When it comes to looking for tax money, Obama is always looking. They need to keep this big machine rolling. The first quarter of the year, where a record high, it's a win-win situation when independent contractors can get an account with a big company. This is a damn communist. Okay, so I wanted to actually mention the fact that there's a lot of colluding against the Uber industry, the sharing economy industry, in relation to the New York Taxis medallion program. I encourage you guys to look into that. It's a collusion to basically make it impossible for Uber to do business in there, and they're trying to stamp out the competition. And they do this again. This is big business colluding with government to stamp out competition. You have to, in order to have a license to a medallion to drive a taxi in New York, it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It used to be almost a million, but they cut into that licensing fee. Uber's activities actually made that price, that medallion price, go down. We have other comments here. We got Owen says, "Imagine how they will fight to fund roads, police, courts, military, and gasp, borders." Steve says they're so good at promising other people's money. So, and I agree. But anyway, that's our show for today, guys. I know there's a lot of stuff going on, and I know this show is very serious in nature today. We had a lot of stuff that is not particularly light. We're not talking about the Kardashians or Caitlyn Jenner, but I think this stuff is incredibly important, and I hope I'm wrong about what's to come, but I feel like there's so many seeds that are being planted. It's only a matter of time until they start to grow, and we can maybe handle one of these at a time, but there's about 5 different seeds that have been planted that if they all coalesce at the same time, if they all come together at the same time, we're not going to be able to survive the growth, the growth of this Leviathan, that this problem that is happening. I think that it's incredibly dangerous, the situation that we find ourselves in. And the answer, again, I'm going to keep pounding this drum, is the Fabian strategy. We reset our foreign relations. We decide what allies are worth protecting and which are not. Stop giving out so much foreign aid. Focus on things here to secure our country, our border, our infrastructure, harden our power grid from an EMP. Worry about becoming energy independent here, getting us off foreign oil, which will hurt Russia, which is good for us, which will hurt Iran, which is good for us, which will hurt the Islamic State, which is good for us, which will make that area of the country irrelevant, which is good for us. All of these things are good for us, and we need to actually start focusing on what is really important. Draw our lines in the sand and not get swept up in a global war, which will lead to economic collapse, unrest, and more terrorism on our soil that we're left, unprepared to defend against. But anyway, that's our show. I certainly appreciate you guys tuning in week after week. MacPack, you guys are the tip of the spear, and thank you so much for tuning in. I want to give a shout-out to Mark Delphine. Thanks so much for joining us again, Mark. And again, you can check us out at our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. Follow us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, get on the move.